The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Loddies, Firestorm Games, and by the very generous donations of you, the listener, via Patreon. Thank you for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 272, The Joy of Six, with hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Hobbs, and special guest, Mr. Shaun Clark. This show was recorded on the 10th of July, 2019. Hello, is this thing on?
Hello.
Oh, yeah, I think, okay, good. Okay, so, hello, good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. This time with added record button pressed.
Yay!
Yeah, we've already done this. Yeah, we've already done this introduction once, and it was brilliant. It was sublime. It was witty. We had repartee. We had, it was wonderful.
There was jokes.
Yeah, I spoke about cricket.
Indeed, there was dancing girls. There was, it was superb. And then I discovered that I'd forgotten to hit record. So here we are for take two. Welcome one and all. Yes, sorry, Shaun. Right, okay, so here we are, the professionals. The guys have been doing it for a long time, with another podcaster, giving a glimpse behind the curtain at what we do in our version, and apparently what we do in our version when we're podcast recording is completely cock it up. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. What on earth are you listening to? Well, it is I, the Brummy Dwarf, otherwise known as Neil Shuck, and we are here talking about tabletop gaming, and all things associated with that hobby. I am joined, as ever, by my partner in crime. It is, of course, the Welsh wizard himself, Mr. Michael Hobbs. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Neil. I'm fine. All good. Move on.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, well, we had a whole thing. We had a whole discussion about the Cricket World Cup. Unfortunately, that appears to be lost to posterity. So the only time that Mr. Hobbs waxes lyrical about cricket has been lost. Never mind. We have a guest with us this evening, flown in at great expense and at very short notice. A fellow podcaster, presenter of The Uncertain Sore Point, and the brand new 6mm dedicated podcast, God's Own Scale. It is none other than Shaun Clark. Good evening, Shaun. How are you, sir?
Good evening. It's Surly from Shropshire here. That's the best I can come up with at short notice. But I couldn't think of anything to rhyme with Shropshire other than Surly. But yes, good evening. Thank you for having me. Good evening, Mike. It's a real pleasure to be here. An honour, indeed. An honour.
You say that now.
I may feel different later.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, welcome to the show, Shaun.
Thank you.
We bumped into Shaun on Sunday at Joy 6, actually, which is what we're going to be touching a lot about later, as we ended up discussing after a panel that I was on, which was news to me at the start of the day, but there we go. Thank you, Mr. Berry. Anyway, and we had been discussing about what we were going to do, and basically we've just come off a big gaming weekend. Myself, Mr. Hobbs, and we were joined by Mr. Plowman and Mr. Randall, and of course Mr. Hickman. Hi guys, gaming, beer, curry, and the Joy of Six show. And while we were there, we bumped into Shaun and thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to have Shaun on the show as someone else to discuss the Joy of Six show with, especially somebody who has a great love of the 6mm hobby. And also, wouldn't it be a great idea to have a chat with him about his new podcast? So here we all are. That's what we're going to do this evening, plus all the usual chatter about what we've been buying and painting and playing and other bits and pieces. So, Mr. Clark, as a long-term listener to the show, you know what's coming next.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. The first thing we need to find out is how on earth you got into the tabletop gaming hobby. So, you're started for 10, and your challenge to do it in less than 30 minutes is to tell us all about how you got into the tabletop gaming hobby.
Having listened to the previous episode with Per, I'm wondering if there was a challenge laid down by him for future guests into the third chair, because being of a certain age and having gamed pretty much for as long as I can remember, there's a lot to tell, but I shall not regale you with the fine detail, just give you that helicopter view. Gaming has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, I guess, with the traditional route through crawling around the floor with Airfix toy soldiers and throwing marbles at them. I'm of that generation where in the sort of mid-70s, I guess, the Second World War was very much in living memory and was part of the common vernacular, I think, where as kids, and I've talked about this on Twitter actually, as kids we'd run round with sticks as machine guns, charging each other in bunkers made out of bushes in woodlands and throwing clumps of earth at each other. So World War II was definitely high on the agenda and that militaristic background, I guess. But I think my routine really is through the role-playing side. As a kid, I played a heck of a lot of role-playing games, starting with Red Box D&D, moving very quickly on to Asian, and through various other role-playing games around at the time, like Marvel Superheroes, Traveller, Gangbusters, Bootil, a lot of those old TSR games back in the day.
Yeah.
And associated with that, always had a keen interest in history, which I think was fostered by my old history teacher, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. But for whatever reason, the way he would deliver his lessons, the whole class eating out the palm of his hand, he would stand at the front of the class, no notes, and just regale us with stories of the Franco-Prussian War and the rise of Germany, the causes and origins of the First World War, and then the Treaty of Versailles and the rise of Hitler. So that became a real passion of mine as a mid-teenage lad, looking for something to sort of cling on to in the difficult world, which was the mid-1980s. And from the role-playing side, I then started to get interested in wargaming. I didn't know anybody local to me that was a wargamer, so my wargaming really consisted of buying the odd magazine that when I got enough money that I'd seen Smith's. So that would have been early days of miniature war games, and then moving on to War Games Illustrated, sort of late 80s, I guess. I think War Games Illustrated started. Then college came along, but it was a bit of an inopportune time, really, because just as I was about to go away to college, I found the local War Games group in Stoke, which had been there all along. I just didn't know about it because pre-internet days, it was difficult to find out about these things other than either through word of mouth or by chance for an article in one of the old War Games magazines, I guess. and I happened to read in the local newspaper that they'd got a convention on, which used to be called Century, held at the King's Hall in Stoke-on-Trent. And I went along to that and to talk about going down a rabbit hole from which I've never emerged into this deep warren that has taken me on down all sorts of different paths. It's a bit like Alice in Wonderland, I guess. You know, there were these huge layouts of tables depicting historical battles in either 15mm or 25mm, pre 28mm becoming the common phrase. Napoleonic battles. There's the Battle of Albuera from the Peninsula, which sticks in my mind from the Burton War Games group who were putting the game on. There was a huge Waterloo game on. There was Ancients. But the one that gripped me was an American Civil War game using Dixon miniatures, just as they first, with their American Civil War figures. I think they had Samurai and one or two other bits and pieces from the early to mid 80s, but certainly for the late 80s, Dixon Miniatures released the American Civil War range, which was the range for American Civil War, replacing the minifigs and the Hinchcliffe type ranges that I think have been the mainstay of people's collections up until that point. Trevor Dixon, the designer, he's certainly got his style, and it's still there today, isn't it?
Mm.
Dixon Miniatures are either quite Marmite, aren't they? People either absolutely love them, or find them a little bit odd in their anatomy, let's say.
They have a look.
Yeah, and they're not exactly compatible with many other ranges.
No. They're distinctive, aren't they? Let's say that.
Yes.
But what blew me away was there's one guy from the Stoke Club who and still is an absolute Civil War nut, and improbably his name is Jeff Davis, and he's very much a fan of the South and the Confederacy, not from a political side, but from that sort of lost cause perspective, I think, and the sort of Gone with the Wind image of the South, that romantic image of dashing cavalry officers with plumed hats, that kind of thing. And he's still a friend to this day. I mean, this is probably 1989, 90, I would guess. But he'd been a huge, and still is a huge fan of the American Civil War. So I'd walked down through this convention hall, which is the old town hall in Stoke-on-Trent, and came across this game depicting the Battle of Chickamauga from 1863. And it was just filled. It must have been about 8 foot by 6, filled with painted Dixon miniatures that Jeff had painted himself, with this rolling scenery that he'd hand scratch built, with the fences, the trees, the hills, the buildings, the rivers, the whole vista of this table just hooked me in completely. I've been aware of what the American Civil War was up until that time, but I can pinpoint to that very moment an abiding interest and passion for the period that's lasted to this day, and I'm still a huge fan of the American Civil War. So from that point, there's probably 6 or 7 guys sat around the table playing this game, using. I hope you're both sitting down at this point. They were using a computer moderated set of rules on a Spectrum 128K. The set of rules were by a company called Software Tactics, or SOTA, it was abbreviated to, and the rules were called Victoriana. And they were
on a Spectrum.
A Spectrum 128K. It was incredible, and I kid you not, Neil. That set of rules on that computer continued to be played for probably the next 15 or 16 years, long after the internet had come in and PCs and Windows. People within the Stoke Club had hoarded Spectrum 128Ks with it was a box set. I remember it vividly with a James Bond theme to it. Now I can't think what the film would have been, which was linked to the release of it, probably Living Daylights or something like that. But several members bought around about 10 or 12 Spectrum 128Ks just so they got a backup in case this one went wrong, and it lasted us then for a long time. So from that day, I joined the club. I went down on they meet on a Friday night at a permanent residence that we have in the middle of Stoke-on-Trent. And from that day, I was a member of the Stoke War Games Club. So 30 years now I've been a member. But I went down and there was a battle in situ. These games would last 4 or 5 weeks, but we'd have 10 or 12 people in this room playing out this battle with Jeff as the umpire and the provider of all the figures and the scenery. And we would have an absolute blast. Now, my first experience was I was in charge of the wagons in the first battle. And considering the battles would last for 4 or 5 weeks, I would quite happily go down on a Friday night and manoeuvre an ammunition wagon from one unit to the next to replenish them with ammunition, which could deplete within the rules. And this wagon might move 6 centimetres a turn, and we might play 4 turns a night. So for the duration of this battle, I might move like 30 centimeters in an evening, but I was fascinated by it. I was just gripped, it was incredible. It was the opening of Pandora's box for me.
So what did you do in the war, Dad? I moved 4 feet.
If I was lucky. I mean, the setup of the Stoke War Games group, and it's like this to this day, and I'll talk a bit more about the club shortly, but sure. We have permanent premises above a hardware store in the middle of Stoke-on-Trent, which we've had now for nearly 50 years.
So permanent premises, which basically meant that you could just leave stuff set up.
Absolutely, yes. So we had 365-day, 24-hour day access, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day access. And it was, I guess, the only use that the rooms could have been put to was as bed sits. It's a pretty grotty building. I mean, it was grotty 30 years ago when I first joined, and it's even more grotty now, but it's our home. It's divided up into individual rooms, so we've probably got 7 or 8 different rooms with tables set up in them, with either Napoleonics being played or back in the day it would have been American Civil War, as I played constantly for several years. There's a room where there's role playing going on, a room where there's a Renaissance theme, and then sort of a Warhammer sort of science fiction, fantasy type rooms. So, and the membership of the club at that time was around about 50 members. But that was my home for every Friday night. Unfortunately, I joined the club just as I was going away to college, so it was only for the 3 years I was away. I was coming back and spending as much time down there as I could, and then obviously post college and going into employment, I was a far more regular member. But there's members there that I'm still very good friends with to this day, that I've met back then. There's original members from about 1971, 72. They first moved into this building, and it's been great. It's a community of gamers that pre-internet I didn't know existed, but I've spent a hell of a lot of my time there. We've got a couple of teachers who are members who've brought pupils from the school down, and they're now grown men, and a couple of them are in teaching themselves, actually. So we've seen generations evolve. Kids of members have come as kids and grown into men, and it's just been a fantastic resource for us for such a long time, unfortunately, the landlord is selling the building. He's retiring. He owns the hardware store beneath our club, and has rented the rooms to us for nigh on 50 years. But he's now retiring. The building's been sold to developers. And yes,
so what's going to happen?
Yeah, so up until last week, we were homeless and looking at alternative options, but to get anything of a similar bent, really, with permanent premises, room for 40 to 50 gamers, the membership fluctuates over time, was just cost prohibitive. We were looking at probably 2 or 3 times the rent that we pay now, therefore 2 or 3 times the subscriptions. It works out roughly £3 a night, so about £150 over the year, but we have to pay £150 as members. It's not like you can turn up on one night and pay £3 and then miss 2 nights, because the bills have got to be paid. There's utilities there, there's rent, there's insurances to pay. So there's certain expenses that have to be met every single month. Sure. And that depends on the members forking out about £150 a year, it is, but absolute value for money. So up until last week, we were homeless and contemplating the thought of going down the route that 99% of clubs do, which is hiring a village hall or something. But having had the luxury of permanent rooms where we can leave games set up, and a lot of members store their figures there and the board games and the scenery. So it's all on hand for us. It was going to be a real culture shock. And the problem was we were likely to see a real fragmentation of the club as people went their separate ways, and essentially the club would die. However, next to the building that has now been sold on is a motor recovery clinic for cars that have been in accidents, that sort of thing. Yeah. The guy that owns that business is very much interested in military vehicles, as in 1-to-1 scale military vehicles, and runs a monthly club in a Nissan hut, which is about 50 feet from our back door of the club that we're in now. And he uses that one night a month on a Thursday, so it doesn't even clash with our Friday nights. And he's offered us very reasonable terms. Now, the Nissan hut is it's not considerably smaller, but it's definitely smaller, and we're going to have to sort of cut our cloth accordingly to fit within it.
Rationalise.
Yes, there you go, rationalise. That's a horrible word for a wargamer to talk about.
It shivers down the spine, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. But we had a meeting, an extraordinary meeting on Friday night, where we unanimously voted to take the offer, and so the club will continue. So it's a real happy end to what was quite a sad story, to be honest. So we move in there in early August, I think it is.
Yeah, superb. So the club is saved.
Yes, the club is saved. We have another permanent venue that essentially we lose for 12 nights a year. So we still have something like 353 days in a year to make use of it. And life of the club will continue. But from my personal perspective, so that there's that American Civil War interest that was developed, along with an interest in the First World War, because several of the members in the room that I was playing in were really keen amateur historians on the First World War. I found out that they had an annual trip for every Remembrance Day over to Ypres. Eventually, once I was sort of accepted into the circle, I was a young guy in my late teens, early 20s, and these were really old guys in the late 30s and early 40s to me, and they were ancient. But eventually got sort of accepted into that circle and invited along to these trips to Ypres for every Remembrance Day, and we did that then for 10 or 12 years, I guess, until one or two of the members started to drift away from the club and a couple passed away. But so I've got very fond memories of travelling over to Ypres and touring around the Ypres salient and going down to the Somme and to Agincourt and Waterloo and all in that sort of general area. So when I talk about community, it was sort of wider than the toy soldier element, although that was the main focus and what brought us together. Yeah. We had this sort of wider social element where one guy that I met down there, he was the best man at my wedding. We've seen each other's kids grow up. It's been a real family environment. There's been ups and downs in membership and one or two fallouts, I guess, that you will see within any community. But we've been pretty solid over that time. So yeah, American Civil War and World War I were my main historical interests, but over the last close on 30 years now, I've been into just about every period, every scale, every genre that you can mention. And just sort of fast forward to more recent times, I've been a huge fan of the Peter Pig line of rules and figures. And really, they provided the historical element to my gaming for many years. I'd travel down to Weymouth to stay with Martin and became part of the playtest group for their various rules and thoroughly enjoyed that from the historical perspective. From a fantasy and science fiction perspective, I've dabbled with Warhammer Fantasy Battle quite a lot, War Machine, Malifaux, all these sort of, as the kids say, on-trend games that seem to rise to prominence over the course of time. And then more recently, within the sort of last 12 to 18 months, I've become a big fan of Mantic games. They've always been on my radar since the early days of those elves that Ronnie released back in the day as cheap replacements for the Games Workshop figures. They're very Marmite, aren't they? I know those original casts of elves and some of the early sculpts I know are very Marmite for people. Some people love them, some people not so much. But the whole ethos of Mantic games I've really bought into. It's such a small company, 21, 22 people working out of an old health centre in the middle of Nottingham in the shadow of the great Leviathan that is the billion-dollar company that is Games Workshop. But I seriously think they punch above the weight with the games they produce. They're moving away from that Kickstarter reliance now to releasing more and more products straight to retail. They've got their IP things going on with the Walking Dead and Kings of War and Dead Zone, Dreadball, all these sort of games are games that really appeal to me. Dead Zone in particular, I absolutely love it. Dead Zone, hashtag Dead Zone is life is a thing that trends on Twitter from time to time or on Facebook, coined by a good friend Ian Davis from the Mantic community. There's Mantic events going on nearly every weekend if you wish to attend. There was a huge one down in London in March called Franticon, which I went down to and met a load of new guys and new friends. That was a 3-day sort of convention, I guess. So that feeds my fantasy science fiction passion. And then more recently, I decided I want some more history in my gaming. So although Peter Pig provided me with an historically based game, I wanted more history. So, and this is the move into 6mm. And I've always been a fan of Peter Berry and Bacchus and the other companies, Rapier, Regular, etc. But I've reached that age now where I'm looking to recreate real battles, and 6mm's the scale for me to do that in. I think that it's affordable. There's economies of scale on the size of table you need. Well, unless you pair Broden, of course, with that incredible effort that he put on at the weekend, and has done so over the last few years at the Joy of Six. Although I know that you were involved, Neil, with the Saga, weren't you, in 6mm at the Joy of Six?
I was 2 or 3 years ago, yes. Yes. Well, I was involved as much as Per did all the work. I turned up and ran a game.
But I think that what that illustrates, and I've been talking about this quite a bit on Twitter recently, when people say, well, 6mil just for the large scale, big battle recreation, the grand tactical or grand strategical level game. For me, it's really a mindset. If you want to play a Western skirmish on your lap on a tea tray with 6mil Western figures from the regular miniatures, then there's absolutely nothing to stop you. It's a mindset. Okay, there's some hurdles to get over, and you need good eyesight. I appreciate that, but it's not impossible. It's absolutely not impossible, and therefore it makes it a far more accessible hobby for people whose finances might be restricted. So we go to war game shows, don't we? And we see these huge, extravagant games with thousands of 28mm figures on beautiful scenery depicting some 18th or 19th century battle, or we'll see a huge Western town layout that's beautifully hand-built and sculpted with hundreds of 28mm figures on the table. They're great to look at, but as a newcomer to the hobby, or as somebody looking for something different within the hobby, you go along and you look at that and say, yeah, that's a fantastic spectacle, but I can't afford that, or it's going to take me 5 years to get to the stage where I can play this game. And for me, 6mil provides you that inroad into a hobby or a period, or a time within history, or a particular kind of game, that with the right mindset and one or two bits of thinking outside of the box, you could play a skirmish on your lap or on the coffee table with half a dozen figures. There's absolutely nothing to stop you. There's no rule. Nobody is going to knock on your door and say, excuse me, you should be using 28mm figures for that game. You can't possibly play it in 6mil. It's a mindset. And if you get the right mindset and you're open-minded enough to the possibilities of what 6mil can provide. I'm sorry, I'm probably straying way off point here. I do apologise. I know this is just how I got into gaming, but it may be appropriate for this cast. I don't know. I've heard one or two people go off point before now.
What are you trying to say, Shaun? What are you trying to accuse us of?
We always keep a very tight rein on our guests.
I've noticed.
Yeah.
So to come bang up to date, that's where I am now. That 6mil is going to provide my historical fix for the foreseeable future. In fact, I've done something which I said I would never ever do, and I've had an absolute blitz on clearing all those half-finished projects, and in fact some finished projects, and just sold everything off to give myself this clean slate to start from. And I tell you what, it is cathartic. It is for the jaded gamer who's perhaps got stuck and thought, oh my goodness, I've got 12 unfinished projects. I've got a pile of lead as tall as myself, and is getting a bit overwhelmed by the whole mess that they've created over the years. And we do this, don't we? We do this to ourselves. It's cathartic to get rid of stuff that you will never, ever get around to. So I have a clean slate. I've resurrected one or two old 6mil projects, which we'll talk about a bit later. And my passion and enthusiasm for the hobby has been rejuvenated to stratospheric levels.
You do realise you've just given half of our listenership a heart attack. I do appreciate that. What I would say is, and this is something I've talked about quite a lot, wargamers, we are a strange breed, not just for the fact that we're grown men playing with toy soldiers. I appreciate that to some people that is a strange way to pass your time, although I would argue sitting in the dark, playing Call of Duty and talking to people around the world on your own is a far stranger way of spending your time, because wargaming is there's a social aspect to wargaming, isn't there? And it's not just playing toy soldiers, it's the research, it's the blogs for the certain figure that you need, it's the painting, it's the artistry, it's the presentation, it's the finding that right set of rules that's going to float your boat.
there's so much more to wargaming than just pushing soldiers. And yet, if you play Call of Duty, well, I find people who do that very strange. That is not to say that they're wrong or to castigate them or anything. That's their chosen hobby. But my chosen hobby is toy soldiers. But to get onto the point, as wargamers, being this strange group of people, we will go to a wargame show and we will see the new shiny that has floated our boat. And we think, oh my goodness, I've got to have that. And you will go and spend £100, £200, or on a Kickstarter. Mike, I know you love your Kickstarters. We'll get wrapped up in. I think you do, young man.
I'm not quite sure how I dodged that particular bullet, but carry on.
Well, I know that you enjoy your Kickstarter too, but I sense the balance is in Mike's favour in the amount that, just judging by the hobby updates that we've had over the years, I get the sense you're more restrained, Neil. I may be wrong. I don't know.
He doesn't know me very well, does he, Mike?
No, clearly not. No. You obviously you edit this podcast yourself.
You do listen to this podcast, don't you? I mean, you've been telling us before that I've been listening. You have actually listened to this.
No, I do. I was paying you a compliment there, Neil, about your restrained nature within the hobby. But do you know what I mean about this cult of the new, where we get very excited about the latest Kickstarter or a new range of figures or a new period or a new scale, and we will then go and spend £200 or sometimes more to satiate that need, and then we'll get it in our hands and we'll put it in a cupboard and not look at it for 2 years. If I'm a golfer and I go and spend £200 on a new golf club, I'm probably going down to the driving range or to the golf course that afternoon, and I'll get some use out of that £200 I've spent. But we as wargamers seem to be in this habit of blowing a load of money and then putting it in the loft as some insulation, or we'll put it in the cupboard, and then 3 years later we'll come across it and say, "Oh goodness me, look at this." Do you know what? I don't know what it is about wargamers that we do this, and it is the cult of the new. I firmly believe that we all get sucked into. I've been sucked into countless times over the years and spent a load of money on something and then left it in a cupboard. And the lead mounting just increases to the point where you can't even look at it because it's just so vast. So, yes, I do apologise to any listeners out there that are now picking themselves up off the floor or switching the podcast off because I'm talking about clearing the decks. But believe me, it's been a cathartic moment for my hobby.
Oh,
cool.
Was that 30 minutes?
Well, I was going to say, Shaun, thank you for that brief introduction. We appreciate we appreciate you following our instructions and keeping it brief and to the point.
Well done.
Fantastic stuff. And we shall look forward to the next 5 hours as we continue to chat with you.
I never said I was brief. You asked for it. I never said I was.
Listeners,
buckle in.
I was going to say, buckle in. Get yourself another beverage. I think it's going to be one of those shows.
It could be.
Shaun, right, so thank you for that. And what we'll do on this point, having had instructions to Shaun, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, it's time to talk about what we've been buying in the last couple of weeks.
Dum, dum, dum.
The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is proud to be sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, purveyors of the finest rules, supplements and gaming accessories for all your wargaming needs. Most recent in their offerings include the 100 Days Scenario Supplement 1815 for General Dame by David Brown, and also the latest pint-sized campaign for Chain of Command, taking the Gemblow Gap. Don't forget that you can get more Two Fat Lardies by viewing Lard TV on YouTube. the latest episodes include a 2-part playing of games from the Gemblo Gap supplement, and also includes the latest video from Big Rich as he customises some more terrain. Also, don't forget that for your listening pleasure, you can also download The Oddcast. It's available on Lord TV, but also via your podcast app of choice. Two Fat Lardies. Play the period, not the rules. Dear beloved, we are gathered once again to confess our shortcomings, or actually confess our emptying of
You call it
wallets.
short.
Indeed. It's been a couple of weeks since we last recorded, and in those couple of weeks, the odd purchase, I was going to say mistake, but no, we don't make mistakes. We make,
We make informed decisions.
Happy little accidents.
That's the word.
Yes, yes, or follow some sort of mad impulse, one or the other. So here we are in that joyous time where we confess all and talk about what on earth we've been doing over last couple of weeks, and maybe a little bit longer for Mr. Clark. Since it's his opportunity to get things off his chest that he obviously hasn't had for a while.
I can't do it.
Don't go too far back, Sean.
No.
Yeah. And then in 1986,
Right, I'll just rub that off my notes then.
yeah,
So 86, I can't go before 86. Okay.
Yeah, try to get the last month.
Okay.
Ish, yes, yeah, that'll do.
Ish.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Again, I'll start. I think my confessional will be over relatively quickly. So, last couple of weeks. Well, I've been buying some Rune Wars miniatures. I've been collecting some boxes. It's all that.
You want to make a little fort, don't you? And Moon Wars boxes are just right for the bricks in your little fort.
I tell you something. You wouldn't believe the amount of packaging that some people put round a box of Rune Wars miniatures. Let's put this out there while we're at it. Okay. There's a couple of things that basically people should stop using. Packing peanuts is definitely one.
Agreed.
My
Because,
cat loves them. She carries around in her mouth and plays for hours.
yeah. And some of the size of these boxes. I mean, considering the smallish size of some of the Rune Wars figures. Some of these boxes are almost of Amazon proportions. So I mean, I appreciate that people tend to buy boxes of certain sizes or what have you, but come on, guys, we're in this for the planet. Let's try and rationalise our packing just a little bit.
Neil Shuck, Eco Warrior.
You want to see the amount of cardboard I've had to put in my recycling bin tonight. I tell you, it's not good.
Even the tennis players at Wimbledon have stopped whenever they change rackets. They're not allowed to use a plastic bag on the racket now.
Yeah.
So I think Wargamers can take a leaf out of the tennis players' book. Or, sorry, Wargames producers.
Yes. Anyway, yes. So, because of this, some would deem OCD aspects of our hobby. that Mr. Clark touched on in the last, the kind of
the hobby or you.
Some aspects of some people within the hobby have an issue with collecting, and it would be nice to kind of get certain bits. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been hunting around for a couple, 2 or 3 character figures for the armies, for the Moon Wars armies I've got. So, and there was some that are a little bit more difficult to get hold of. So basically, the last couple of weeks have been spent hunting around for those. It's only 2 or 3, and of course, there's a lot of people, or several companies, that are currently actually selling Rune Wars miniatures, things like Rune Wars boxes. They pop up from time to time. So I've been kind of. They're in my frequent searches on the internet. So and some people have been doing some really good deals. I mean, A1 Toys is one. A company called Entoyment is another. I think they're in Poole. I think
they're very good. Very good.
They are. I've been most impressed. I've been less impressed with. I've been less impressed with Element Games since I got hit by an issue that I look out for. That is the companies that advertise stuff for sale that don't actually have them in stock. And because I was hunting around, and especially since Rune Wars is, it's still, a lot of people deem it to be board game. Because it's Fantasy Flight, and so there's a lot of board game companies that bought the Rune Wars miniatures because they just shipped them with all the other Fantasy Flight releases. And so when you go round on all their sites, they either say they're in stock or they're not. Okay. Element Games also have another. They have in stock, they have unavailable, but they also have another status which is available, which means you can order it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's in stock, which for most things is fine. Okay? However, when you've got a miniature system, which we know for Rune Wars is basically going out of print, which is one reason why you can pick stuff up either very cheap or quite expensive, depending where you go. It is a system that is no longer supported by Fantasy Flight in their organised play, so it is going out, but you can pick some nice stuff up. I quite like the miniatures, and it means that, you got some nice warbands for things like Age of Magic. And, Rune Wars itself is not a bad game. But I'm probably going to end up doing other things. Anyway, bottom line is, placed an order with Element Games, and they said, okay, right, so it'll due to be, you'll get an email when it's dispatched, they've taken my money, and that's all I've heard. That's it. They've taken my money, and So, I think that's a buyer beware issue. I think I didn't realise they did that sort of thing. And so, I will be most happy if I am being completely off base here, and everything will be hunky-dory, and it will all turn up, and everything will be wonderful. It will mean that I will have a second miniature, because I subsequently found it from somewhere else and bought it because they turned around and said, "Oh, we got it in stock. Oh, I bought it. Oh, they dispatched it on the same day I bought it." Mm-hmm. Why do companies do this? Why? Anyway, so back off.
I'm with you on that, Neil. I'm with you on that. Yeah,
that's essentially all I've been doing. Quite sad, really. And I maybe dropped a pre-order in for the last of the Galactic Civil War Star Wars Legion miniatures, because they're all due to be released in July. The last 2 packs are Rebels and Imperials. You know, the Tauntaun Riders and the Veterans and Shore Troopers and stuff. Because as of August, Legion's going over to Clone Wars. But they're releasing some last miniatures. So that's what I've done in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, that was me. So not an awful lot, and as you may have heard, not a lot from a certain weekend, which apparently we're not talking about until we talk about the weekend anyway. So, but yeah, I've actually been pretty good. Although I did buy some magnets. Which at the point they have now arrived, I realise are just a tad small.
Which ones did you get?
Pardon?
Which ones did you get?
I got 2 mil by 1 mil.
Oh, cool. I'll buy them off you if you don't want them.
Because I suppose they're ideal for I don't know, that they might work for things like
Bag the Hun.
Are they a bit small for Bag the Hun?
Nope.
Okay. Because I was thinking maybe 3 mils for Bag the Hun, but and they might well work for Red Alert, but we'll see. Anyway, so that was basically it. Not a lot. Basically, a 2 or 3. It was a unit of Scions, which is the Rune Wars Latari Alpha equivalent of Treants, and a couple of character figures. And that's it. I'm done.
You happy?
Tell me about it. Yeah. Sean, how about you?
Don't rub it in, Neil.
Yeah, what have you been up to recently, mate?
So from 1986 on. Oh no, sorry.
Yeah.
For the last couple of months.
Yeah. Especially after your recent epiphany.
My recent epiphany. I'll just add the slight caveat that although 6mm is my passion of late, that doesn't exclude other scales. Because we are a broad church. We are a broad church.
Very broad.
So, actually, not an awful, not masses, but I'll tell you a couple of things. So, I have been a recent convert to Two Fat Lardies.
Good man.
That you're both very well acquainted. In fact, I was most disappointed that I couldn't attend OML. I was due to attend, but real life circumstances just took that away from me, unfortunately. But so from that stables, I bought the Chain of Command rulebook and the Blitzkrieg 1940 book, and to go with those, having bought thousands of Peter Pig figures and enjoyed them over the years, I've now got the beginnings of 2 sides for British and German using the Peter Pig early war figures. Contrary to what
15 mil it's the best scale to do Chain of Command in. 15 mil.
Well, some say 20.
Well, I may or may not have picked that idea up from this podcast, listening to it over the last few years. Contrary to what I said in the previous segment, those figures were purchased probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago and are now sat on the shelf behind me untouched. But the less we say about that, the better.
No, John, don't. You've got to let figures acclimatise. They've
got to mature, haven't they?
They have to mature in your room. If you paint them too quickly, you get moisture on them. So you just have to let them.
Top hobby tip there.
Yeah.
Top hobby tip. Yes.
A couple of years, I find, is about the best.
I shall remember that, yes, because it will probably be a couple of years before I get round to them. But I had that rush of enthusiasm on getting the rulebook because, to be honest, I've been really taken with the coverage of Chain of Command through the various medias, including yourself and the YouTube channels from Rich and Nick. It's been really good. I suspect that will be my go-to skirmish levels set of rules. So yes, I got the the basics of Two Forces for those. I'm also currently in the middle of a painting challenge regarding Mantic games. Now, they've just announced 3rd edition Kings of War, which is coming out in October, I think it is.
I'd like to think we were responsible for that because obviously we covered Kings of War in the last show, and obviously at the point we covered Kings of War, Ronnie obviously saw that. Well, finally, Meeples have caught up with the idea. So in that case, then let's screw everybody over and announce another edition.
Yay! It's the grand wheel of life in wargaming terms, isn't it? That every so often these games get this refresh. But so I am looking forward to that. Actually, I really enjoy Kings of War as a very it's the spiritual what's the word? It's where yes, exactly. It's where Warhammer Fantasy Battle players who didn't like what Games Workshop did to the setting and the game with Age of Sigmar. It's where they naturally gravitated to. And I think I'm going off on another tangent here. My goodness, what's going on?
Please don't say that 3rd edition of Kings of War blows up a planet.
No, I've no idea what the changes are coming into it. I doubt.
I'm disappointed. Here you were selling us on the fact you knew everything, Mantic. You were like this with Ronnie, and I was hoping to get the lowdown on everything that was happening.
There may be NDAs involved. There's been a rumor of hexagonal bases, which I will quash. But yes. Cut a very long story short. So I'm on a painting challenge. I am painting 12 Mantic armies in 12 months. 12 fantasy armies in 12 months. I'll just let that settle over the scene.
Have you started yet?
I have started. I'm 2 armies in. It started around about the middle of May, which was the Mantic Open Day at Mantic HQ. So from that point on, it was the challenge started. So it's essentially Mantic sell mega army deals, which will come out around about 1,500 points, give or take, for each of the armies that they do. Yeah. And I'm buying one of those a month, painting it up within the month, and then moving on to the next. So I've just finished the Forces of Nature, which is sort of salamanders and the Trident Realms Naiads, which are like fish people, I guess, and wood creatures, that sort of thing. Dwarfs are nearly done, and I've just taken receipt of the Ogre army, which fortunately is only 38 figures. So that shouldn't take too long with my painting method anyway, which is spray and then wash. Spray, detail and wash. So that's taking up quite a lot of my hobby time. I've been buying. We're on buying, aren't we? Not painting, sorry. I went to UK Games Expo. I was actually a Mantic Pathfinder there, so demonstrating one of the games for them. But I picked up, again, this is most unusual for me because I'm not a massive board game player or RPGer actually at the moment, but I've picked up a game called Escape the Dark Castle by Themeborn.
Yes.
Are you aware of it?
Just a tad. Yes.
Played it yet, so I'm hoping it's...
Oh, it's a storming game. It is... No, it's been... funny enough, I backed Escape the Dark Sector, which finished on Kickstarter a couple of weeks ago.
Is that the science fiction version?
That's like science fiction. It's
yes.
They have amended the gameplay apparently, or they've done some different things for the science fiction version. But there may be the odd one or two of us. Not me actually. Which is why I went for the sci-fi version, because I haven't got Escape the Dark Castle, but Mr. Luff and Mr. Hickman own it, and it has been played more than once.
Excellent.
It is an excellent game.
It was it was sold to me by Elvis, who's the customer services guy at Mantic. He picked up one of the expansions at Games Expo, and then in the car on the way back to the hotel, he was telling me how great this game was, and he sold it to me as a modern day version of the pen and paper role playing games from the 80s, sort of fighting fantasy, that sort of theme or genre, if you like. Yeah,
very much so. Yeah.
So the next day I went along to the stand and I picked up the base game. I've got the first expansion, which is Cult of the Death Knight, and I'm holding in my hand. I never thought I'd ever see one of these again, but it's a tape cassette, sort of, the C90 type tape cassettes.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
it's the original soundtrack to Escape the Dark Castle.
It was because it was last year, because they launched it last year.
That's right.
And it was like, yeah, and it was like, oh, we have a tape cassette, and I was like, so are you selling the cassette players to go along with it? Because it's like, who on earth still has their cassette player? I mean, obviously some people may still do, but yeah.
I had to seriously sort of go back through my mind and think, have I got one in the loft still? And I do still have one of those old sort of stack hi-fis in the loft. So I've not actually played it yet, so I've no idea what it sounds like. But I did show it to my daughter, and there's that old meme, isn't there, of a tape cassette and a pencil. And you'd need to challenge the modern generation to say, what's the link between this pencil and this tape cassette?
Yes.
So my daughter's looked at it with, some strange looks to think, what on earth is that, Daddy?
Yeah. I suppose I kind of realised that the to a certain extent, especially the fantasy version, has that kind of retro element to it, in the fact of it's looking back at, do you remember the fighting fantasy? I mean, actually, I started following Final Fantasy on Twitter, and recently, I suppose because there's been a couple of anniversaries, significant kind of anniversaries of some of the books. There's an awful lot of fighting fantasy stuff around at the moment. Apparently, it's sometime around about now. They now have Fighting Fantasy Fest.
Yes, they do.
Which I think it's in its third year this year, and it's really come back into back into vogue. So I suppose having the cassette is just kind of that retro vibe. I mean, I did ask, I think this year, I did say, you are going to, it's like, are you going to actually kind of release this on something like, something a bit more kind of, like MP3 or something? And it was kind of like, apparently they're thinking about it.
I think it might be available. I think it might be available on an MP3.
I think it might be available on MP3, but as you say, the whole thing with, yes, a tape cassette. I mean, it was like...
it's amazing, isn't it?
It is. Somebody was saying to me the other day that somebody took a... we are now so far off topic, isn't true? But they turned around, someone took a floppy disk into school, and the first question that it was asked by the children was, "Sir, why have you done a 3D print of the save icon?"
Oh my
goodness. Yes, moving swiftly on. Right, yes, sorry. Escape the Dark Castle. Sean, back to you.
Escape the Dark Castle. Yes. Just to continue that off-topic chat for 5 seconds, regarding the fighting fantasy, Ian Livingstone is actually releasing a new book. I forget what it's called now. Something Assassin. But that's out very soon. It's his first game book in, I don't know, 30 odd years. But you're right, there is a real revival around fighting fantasy. It's that nostalgia trip, isn't it, I guess? Dirk, from the Grognog Files, taking us back to our 80s origins of role playing. I mean, that's a fantastic cast, isn't it? Some real nostalgia flavour there. But Yeah, so that's coming out. So purchase. So there was that from UK Games Expo, and then finally at the Phalanx show in St Helens, which is an excellent little war game show. I don't know if either of you have ever been up to it.
No, not one of made. No.
No, it's run by the St Helens War Game Society. I haven't actually been for 2 or 3 years now, but you walk into the hall and it is that yellow light that we used to get in the 80s at these shows. It takes some time for your eyes to adjust in an old sports hall, but it took me way back to conventions back in the 90s where everything was yellow, wasn't it? But it's a great show, and I highly recommend it to anybody who's in the area. It usually runs around the middle of June, and it's one of the few shows that still has to Bring and Buy, actually. Bring and Buy seem to have moved aside in favour of the tabletop sales most recently at the shows, but that was great. So Pete Berry was there, and my purchase from the show was the beginnings of a new project, which we'll see hopefully culmination at Joy of Six next year, to do the within the Great War Spearhead 2 rule set. There is a scenario for the Tietval sector of the first day of the Somme. So on a 6x4 table with the German trench lines, 3 divisions of British against 1 division of Germans. And I made the first purchases for that game of a division of British and a division of German. And then I promptly drove down to Timecast, who were about 20 minutes from my house, and spent more than is conscionable on some latex trenches for that game next year. And my wife's downstairs. I know she can't hear this. So. But just in case she listens to the podcast later, and it may happen, I shan't disclose the amount, but it was more than I expected to spend on some latex. But yeah, so
on that point, we'll step away from that. We'll step away from that particular thing. Yeah, yes.
Neil, can I say something? This has been a long-held ambition of mine to use this phrase: moving swiftly on.
Edit it out, Neil. Edit that bit out.
No,
No.
Mike.
He's fitting in quite nicely, isn't he, Neil? I get to watch my job. Right. What have I bought in the last few weeks? Well,
I'm putting my feet up at this point.
yeah. No, this bit will be quite short. I've been painting a few things recently, and I started painting up one of the Reaver Titans for Devil Titanicus.
That was very nice.
It looked lovely.
Yeah.
Which then got me to thinking.
You're talking about it in the wrong part of the show, but I'll let you.
I know, yeah, but it matches onto this. You see, and that made me think. Oh, I could do with some more weapons. So I bought some of the weapon spoos they got on the W site. So I bought 4 weapon spoos.
So are they different from what is otherwise available?
Yeah.
He says, showing his complete ignorance.
They're different to the basic ones. Yeah, they've released 2 types of each Titan, right. But you can buy the weapon spoos, which allow you to convert between 2.
And you have magnetised all your weapons, haven't you?
I've magnetised everything on those Titans: the bodies, the legs, the lot. If I could stick a magnet anywhere, it went there. So that.
Pinning your so last century.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do it all with magnets. Yeah.
For me, it's the magnet or nothing. And then I thought I could do with some more Titans, so I bought a Titan battle group.
Okay, what's in a Titan battle group?
Another Warlord, another Reaver, and 2 Warhounds.
Oh, is this for an opposing faction?
No, I've got another 2 factions already. This is just, reinforcements.
Right.
Yeah. Then I saw the video about Apocalypse, the new GW game.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Yes. So Apocalypse being the throw all your toys on the table version of 40k.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's there was an old version of Apocalypse, which was just play 40k, but with everything. This one is a little bit more refined. It's
Now that was a game that would be ideal for would have been ideal for Shaun's club because for all intents purposes it takes about 4 weeks to play it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes, definitely.
the new one looks a lot better because it's not single figure removal. You've got your units in groups of 5 or 10 or more for hardy things. And it's streamlined the rules. It's taken out a load of the special character rules, and it's fast to play. And as units take damage, the whole unit will come off. So it's single. It's basically element removal. Perfect for playing 40k.
So in other words, it's epic.
I thought to myself, that's got a lot of that would work quite well in 6 mil, I thought, basically.
But haven't you got a game that does that with figures in 6 mil?
Yeah, I've got several games that does that in figures in 6 mil using the 40k universe.
When's that ever stopped anybody?
Yes. That's not the point, though. I know, unusual as it is for me to voice, to be something anywhere near the voice of reason, but I just thought I'd raise the question while we were It's a valid question and it's well made, and you're completely correct. However, I looked at the rules. The rules look quite interesting and nice and sharp. They use resources of cards, and you can use to bolster things, and it all looks like pretty. And it's new, Neil, for God's sake. And I thought that would be really good.
Cult of the New. There you go. Yeah.
Cult of the New, yeah. Of which I am unrestrained.
How old is Adeptus Titanicus? Oh, so last year.
No. But what I thought was, the Adeptus Titanicus is based in the Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
And I've never really done Epic in Horus Heresy. I thought I could use Apocalypse and do Horus Heresy using my lovely new painted Titans, which I've got.
Mm-hmm.
And I could maybe do some new armies using, I've got loads of Space Marines and Land Raiders and Rhinos and stuff from back in the day. So I could do like a Horus Heresy thing using Apocalypse. Kill 2 birds in 1 stone. Job's a good one.
I like how you throw in casually. I can do some armies. Just casually throw it in there. Not one, some.
I always do 2 armies, Sean. Because then I can turn up to a meeting and go, "Do you want to play this?" And they got no excuse to say no.
But if it was just 2 armies, you'd say a couple. Some to me is 3+.
Yeah, I might do a couple.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do the original Dark Angels, because I've always been a Dark Angels fan.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and they were black in that day, so they're easy to paint.
Okay, so if the Dark Angels, because this is the thing that gets me, if the Dark Angels had original black armor,
yeah,
why on the box of Space Marine are they in green?
That's the Salamanders.
Oh, okay. So I thought they were Dark Angels. They're not the Salamanders.
Yeah, Salamanders.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, I digress.
And which box are you talking about now? The original Space?
This was this is the one we were having the argument about over the curry, where I was right and you were wrong on Saturday night.
I've got no recollection of that at all, Neil. Yeah, that one.
Strange that. Yeah. Far too much beer consumed on that night to remember anything as trivial as having having an argument. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not sure which one was on the first edition of Space Marine. But anyway, let me just type that in, and we'll have a look whilst I chat away.
You know, that's the 1989 version that came out after the 1987 version of Rogue Trader.
That's correct.
I just wanted to point that out, just to kind of clarify that point.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that point. And you are completely correct. Because yes, it did come out after Rogue Trader.
Yes.
I was wrong.
But they're not Dark Angels.
No, I don't think they are. In fact, they're not green. They are black.
In which case they are Dark Angels.
It could be. I don't know.
So I thought they would. Sorry, right. So this is you talk. This is okay. So this is weird. The fact that you and me both have Dark Angels as our favourite chapters, but at least the fact is you've got at least one painted Dark Angels army.
2.
Whereas 2. Whereas I have. Admittedly, I have. I think I've sold most of mine, but I did. I mean, I did. I also got a load of Deathwing Terminators.
Oh, that's cool.
But anyway, we
digress.
Yeah,
digressing a lot.
Sorry, move on.
Yeah,
Yes. So Space Marines. Yes.
Yeah, so Apocalypse has been bought.
Yes.
And
that looked like a big box.
It was a little, big box, lots of space for more cards. Oddly enough. So that's been done. Obviously, Matt Fancy's doing it in 28 mil because he's got all of the Death Guard known to man. So
he just wants to use his big demons he's got in that cupboard, isn't he? That's what he wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the perfect game for that. So there we go. So I was Apocalypse, and the only other thing I bought was thanks to Wayne Peters, hello Wayne, who pointed me towards the fact that Firestorm had the brand new BattleTech starter set in stock. So I've now got another BattleTech starter set. So I've got the old one.
So that's to go with your vintage BattleTech starter set.
Yeah, so I got the vintage one and I got the new one.
Excellent.
Is that a new edition then, Mike?
Yeah, I think the rules have changed, Sean, because the rules have been going for 30 years.
Yeah.
But I think they've learned from a few other companies about, it's quite a difficult game to get into, BattleTech, I found, because where do you start? So they've turned around and said, look, here's a starter set. It's got, I think it's 8 mechs in there, which are nice new plastic ones. Got a quick start rule book in there, lots of fluff, and a board. Off you go and play.
Are those sculpts better than the previous starter set that came out? I can't think, a couple of years, 3 years ago. I do remember there was some complaints that the sculpting wasn't quite as crisp on those.
Yeah, it was quite soft. It was that sort of soft plastic. This is a much harder plastic, so they look a lot nicer. So so BattleTech are back on the scene. So for research purposes, I picked that up, Neil, for a future podcast when we talk about BattleTech.
Taking one for the team again, Mr. Hobbs. What? I mean, BattleTech, Armageddon. I mean,
Apocalypse. Stop
Yeah,
getting mixed up. Armageddon's completely okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes. But it's close. Begins with A.
Begins with A. It's 40k.
Yeah. But I mean, you are such a hobby hero.
Well, I don't like to blow my own trumpet, Neil, but you're not wrong.
He's the roving reporter, though, isn't he? He's got to go out. He's in the field. He's in the field, taking the blows for the podcast.
Yeah, doing the pre-buy-in, as I think Frank or Sean said.
Yeah. What are you trying to say when you say he's the roving reporter? Are you trying to accuse him of being the size of a 28mm miniature? Yeah.
I would never be sizest.
So that's Confessional. Temptations. You got anything?
Yeah. So there was Sean's earlier going, oh no, Neil doesn't do Kickstarters anymore. Well, there's a couple of Kickstarters due out imminently, or that they've just launched as you're listening to this podcast. July the 12th, I think, is the first one, which PSC Games, Plastic Soldier Company, are doing a new version of the classic Britannia board game. Britannia, it was last reprinted by Fantasy Flight, I believe. But it's a board game that takes you through, over the course of several rounds, basically takes you through all the invasions of various people groups into Britain. And so, a classic dudes on a board game. And they're launching that along with a new version of the game designed as a 2-player game, which the rules, I believe, are going to be written by none other than Dan Mersey. The game itself, it's a dudes on a board game, and PSC are producing them as full miniatures, so I believe they're going to be 15 mil dark age miniatures.
Yeah, cool.
So they're launching that in a couple of days' time as we speak, and then next week we see another Kickstarter launched, which goes back to what we were talking about on the previous show from the UK Games Expo, where we played a playtest version of the new game from Awaken Realms called Etherhalls. That launches on the 16th of July.
Oh dear.
Yeah. I thought I was being so good this month. Having played the first part of Etherhalls, it's very intriguing, and there have just been some new gameplay videos released prior to the I think it's Man vs. Meeples and somebody else have released some gameplay, so have a quick look on YouTube and you should be able to see those. It's a really interesting game. I mean, the one thing with Awaken Realms is they certainly kind of mix up their genres and they kind of push the envelope on what they're doing. So this is another storytelling game, and in some ways it's reminiscent of what they did with Tainted Grail. But it's a different genre and going along different. And there's lots of different things involved, and some stunning miniatures from what we've seen already. So that launches on the 16th of July, and I think I might end up backing. Well, I'll certainly end up backing one of the two, but I potentially might end up backing both.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good game, so I'll be very interested in that.
That's me.
Yeah, I think the only other temptation I've got is something we're going to talk about in the Joy of Six part, so I'll leave it till then.
I'm kind of alongside that, so I'll at that point. Yeah.
Temptation for me, I'm actually trying to find BattleTech in any online store. I can't find it because it's a game that I've always fancied having a go at. But I can't find it in stock anywhere, to be honest. So the only thing I can see on Firestorm Games is a box set with 2 miniatures in it. I take it.
Yeah, that's the starter set, which isn't really worth playing. It's got like a very quick one scenario in there.
Right.
I think that's the £20 one, isn't it?
Yes. So nothing else tickling my fancy just at the moment.
Cool. Okay, in that case then, what we'll do, we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, it's time to talk about what we've been doing in the hobby, what we've been playing, what we've been painting, and stuff like that. We'll be back shortly. Hi everyone, Neil here. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, I'm wondering, would you consider becoming a patron of the show? For as little as $1 a month, you can help support us in what we're doing with the show. For that, you can get access to a monthly question and answer show. That will also allow you to ask questions. If you pledge more, you potentially get bonus podcasts. And you never know, you might even get invited to be on the show yourself. If you want to know more details, please follow the link to our Patreon page, which is on the front of the website. That's www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. Thanks a lot. And we're back, and it's time to chat about what we've been up to in the hobby over the last couple of weeks. Not a lot as far as painting is concerned. Very little, in fact. I kind of lost my hobby mojo. I actually produced, for the first time in ages, I produced a Diary of a Gamer, Secret Diary of a Gamer update for Patreon, where I was chatting about losing my painting mojo for the month and looking at inspiring to get back into it. So I haven't painted a lot. I've just started modelling again. This was thanks to the weekend, which I'm sure we will talk about some more because it just so happened that several of us got together over this weekend for gaming, beer, curry, and Joy of Six. But as part of that, as gamers do, we ended up having lots of other different conversations, one of which involved full thrust. Thank you, Mr. Randall. And so, this is the scary thing. I went home and I went, right, I walked to a place, I went, they are here, and picked up 2 bags, which contained 2 full thrust starter fleets, which, since people will know how organised my models are. The usual answer to where is X, Y, or Z is it's in a box somewhere. These I knew exactly where they were. I went and picked them up. So possibly as the first thing to kind of get my juices flowing, if you like, I've just started putting together a couple of full thrust fleets. The USNC and Islamic Federation I got because I bought them because of their at the time because of their resemblance to certain factions in one of my favourite sci-fi TV series. And can I just say, I really hope they've improved the moulds. But the USNC ships, especially because of the style of ship, an awful lot of the full thrust ships are one-piece castings. However, some are not, and because the USNC have essentially kind of rotating wings in the middle of the ship, or bits that are meant to see as if they're rotating in the middle of the ship.
Do you mean like the ones in Babylon 5?
You mean like the Earth Force ones? I don't know. I couldn't possibly comment on that, mate. But okay. Yeah. Anyway, so obviously they are all cast as separate pieces, and they're meant to have like pegs and slots to put things in. So you just slot all the pieces together and stuff. Let's just say they require a bit of work. Yes. So that's been that's what I've been on. Hobby wise, that's kind of what I've been doing for the past couple of days. Well, basically since the weekend. I spent a few hours basically trying to get ships to fit together without the aid of green stuff. they're a bit flashy, and they got all these like slots and stuff that are meant to fit. Everything's meant to fit into, and they don't. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I hope, as I say, I mean, I've seen since there's a lot of the pictures on the website now appear to that a lot of the ships appear now to be in resin. So unless they're masters, I think they might have actually redone a lot of the molds. So hopefully the newer fleets are better. Oh yes, I do actually have to confess that I was very much looking at the new starter fleet box set for Full Thrust. The one that's got the crusties and the NSL in, with all the rolls and lots of extra bits and pieces for £60. That looks to be something I might kind of be picking up in the very near future. So that's kind of what I've been doing on the modelling front. On the playing front, loads of games on the playing front. So a quick sweep. We've had a couple of games of Outer Rim, the new Star Wars game from Fantasy Flight. That is most excellent. I've had a couple of games of Memoir 44 with Mr. Hickman, because we found ourselves with a two-player for a two-player night. Played a game called Into the Black, which is a kind of a boarding party game, which is something that Mr. Hickman backed on Kickstarter a while ago, which is okay. It's you're space pirates, you're investigate, you're basically, it's a board game, but you're basically exploring a ship, and it's a cooperative game. The idea being is to try and perform an objective before you get overrun by the crew. That's perfectly fine. Had a game of Ninja All Stars, which is the old Chibi Ninja game from the pretty much sadly defunct Ninja Division. Still a good game, and I'm still very tempted to. Well, I keep looking at Josh and saying you should paint these figures because they are gorgeous. But say Chibi Ninjas, and then we so from the weekend had a game of Terraforming Mars. I've had a couple of games since of Tiny Epic Mechs, which is the game we were talking about on the last show. Yes, Arena Mech Combat. It's very silly, but it's huge amounts of fun, and especially when you put yourself into mech suits and you start buying weapons and attaching the weapons to the little suits as you're going around the arena and stuff. Oh, it's so much fun. It's really cool. That is about it. Oh, and I'm going to put a review up of another game that we had, which was Battle Ravens. It was one of the games I was given to review from PSC Games at the Games Expo.
Was it good? Tell me all about it, Neil. Okay, that's the one-word review.
Incisive.
Yeah, I think that'll do it.
Covers it all, really.
Yeah. I think we know.
Yes, I think it was. Oh my word! And moving swiftly on. Put it this way: I'm thinking I might have to write a review of another game first. Otherwise, that might be the last PSC game I get a review copy of. Yes. Okay. So that's been me. Not a lot painted. Well, no, nothing painted. A few bits of stuff kind of built, and lots of games played. Shaun, what have you been up to, mate?
Quite a lot, actually. So, as previously mentioned, I'm at the beginning of a 12 armies and 12 month challenge. So, I'm coming to the end of the second army for that now. The dwarves painted; they're all painted. I've tried to go for a sort of underground dwarven hold or a fallen dwarven hold theme, but I just can't get the basing right. So in Kings of War, a lot of people, myself included, multi-base the figures, so there's no individual figure removal. So you can make small dioramas on the bases, which I'm really enjoying. And because it's an element game where you remove the whole unit, you don't actually, albeit ostensibly a regiment represents 20 figures, you don't actually have to have 20 figures on the base. So typically I'm using sort of 14 or 15 figures, which then gives space for scenic items and to create a bit of a diorama. I'm just really struggling to get that looking as I want at the moment. So that's slowed me up. I'm probably a week behind schedule just because I'm tearing my hair out over trying to get that to look right. So that's on the table.
So how many miniatures on average are there in a Kings of War army?
Okay, so you might have between 12 and 16 drops, as they call that, might be either units or individual characters. So you might have 2 or 3 heroes, and then say 10 to 12 in an average army, 10 to 12 units, which will either be the regiments or the hordes. Which are the regiment is let me get this right, 100 mil wide by 80 deep, so it's 5 by 4 on the old 20 mil bases. That's the sort of footprint of the unit. But you don't need to put 20 figures on there, because you could really just put 1 figure on there to represent the unit, which wouldn't look great, but if money was tight. But within the Kings of War rules, there's something called minimum model count. There's then preferred model count and full model count. Full model count is you would have 20 figures on that regiment base. Preferred count, I think, is somewhere around about 75% of the figures. So you would have 15 or 16 figures, and then minimum model count is usually around about 11 or 12. So you could really do Kings of War on the cheap if you went for minimum model count. So a regiment that would actually represent 20 figures, you might only need 11 or 12 figures. But you could have bits of fallen masonry and bricks or trees or rocks or boulders or whatever scenic item you want to make it look like a real diorama, I guess. So that's really attractive. So out of these mega army deals that I'm using as the basis for the painting challenge, I'm actually getting more out of the box than is on the cover art, if you like. So on the cover art there might be 6 or 7 units. I'm probably getting up to 9 or 10 units, or maybe 11, dependent on how many figures I'm using for an individual unit. There's a lot of flexibility there. I mean, clearly Mantic would like you to do full model count, where you have 40 figures in a horde or 60 figures in a legion. So, and it does look great. Full model count looks great. But if you want to do the scenic diorama style bases, you can certainly go with 14 or 15 figures. Because for me, in a fantasy war game, the image of zombies being in perfect rank and file of under orders and marching in these strict regiments doesn't really paint the picture of what I think a zombie horde would do. A zombie horde would be all clambering over one another and trying to get to the front to eat your face off.
Organised zombie horde is just far too Michael Jackson, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I have an undead army already, and I've got lots of zombies in it. And the zombies are sort of all pushing towards the front of the base and trying to climb over one another to get to you. It's a real rabble effect, which I think quite nicely.
It's quite interesting because actually considering the range of sculpts you've got in the Mantic zombies, having a point where they're actually kind of all falling over each other and what have you, it actually works quite well with that particular figure range.
Yeah, absolutely. And in actual fact, they do some plastic ghouls as well. And you can combine those 2 sprues and get infinite numbers of undead, ghoulish, zombie-ish type characters. So that's what I did when I built mine. And out of about 140, 150 zombies I've got, no 2 look the same, because there's so many varieties of pose and sculpts. I think it's certainly acknowledged as one of the better plastic kits that Mantic released in the early days, and I absolutely love those. But yeah, so the dwarves have been on the table, agonising over the basing. I don't know why. I should just really get on with it and be satisfied. We just put some sand on, paint it grey, and dry brush it and be done with. But the OCD element of my gamer psyche says I need to get it perfect. But it is delaying me. So they're on the way. I'm having now been absorbed by the 6mm world. Several years ago, I bought a bag, two armies from Irregular Miniatures in 6mm for the Crimean War. They did a little battle pack with a lovely set of rules called War Against Russia, which is one of these very old-fashioned rule sets that's photocopied at home and then folded over into A5 size and stapled, with some very charming little artwork in it. But it recreates all the major battles of the Crimean War. So the battle pack has got the forces for the Battle of the Alma. So I've just finished painting the British for that, which is 10 brigades. It's only actually 3 strips of the Irregular Miniatures with 6 figures per strip, so 18 figures per unit. Irregular Miniatures are
stylistic.
Thank you. Yes, they are stylistic, and as is my painting. My painting is impressionistic, I guess. That I've gone with. It's been very quick, but from tabletop distance, they look okay.
Yeah, they look fine. I used the 6mm World War II ones for a long time.
Yes, I think they've got a charm all of their own.
Yeah.
And they are what they are, and I think once you've painted them up, they look absolutely fine. Yeah. And do you know what? They fight just as well as a Perry 28mm figure does on a battlefield. Once you start rolling the dice, they fight just as well. So I've been painting those, and that's it for painting. Gaming wise, I went to a Dead Zone event at Black Dragon in Hinckley, which I think's your way, isn't it, Neil?
Yeah, it is.
Just outside Leicester. Yeah.
Yes, that is my. Yeah, not a store I've been to. I mean, from looking at their website on the odd occasion, it seems that they are very active in running events.
Very active.
It's not a place I've actually managed to get along to. But yeah, it's not actually that far away. That far away.
Yeah, it's a lovely store. I've got to say, very light, very airy, very clean. Good stock levels of all the usual suspects that you find within these stores. It's smaller than the likes of Element Games or Firestorm, but perfectly serves hobby needs of any game or whatever of the trendy games that the Warlord type games or the GW or Flames of War. It's got good stock levels of all of those. Run by Gary Sharp, who is the brother of Andy Sharp, who is affectionately known as Dr. Dead Zone. He's involved in the development of Dead Zone, the game and the rules and the expansions. So we had a very friendly event there, played 4 games. I actually won 2, which is most unusual because out of 6 events I've been to now within the Mantic canon of games, so Kings of War, Dreadball and Dead Zone, I've got 5 wooden spoons. I'm an absolute terrible player of the games, but thoroughly enjoy them anyway. The result doesn't matter to me, and I'm not a competitive gamer. I'm a social gamer, and I get my social fix by going down and seeing this whole community that exists around the Mantic games. So, but yeah, I won 2 games at that, which I was still fighting to get off the bottom of the table, actually. The last game of the day against a guy I've become friends with, Alan Goodenough. I'm friends with on Facebook now. We were fighting to get to win the wooden spoon, I guess. Whoever lost would win the wooden spoon. And I managed to win that game, fortunately, and avoid another wooden spoon because my kitchen is now full of various wooden utensils, like wooden meat tenderizers and soup spoons and what have you that I've won over the years from various events. So that was great. It's a thriving community within in these various Mantic games. Dead Zone in particular has got a real following. In fact, I'm running an event at the end of November at Goblin Gaming in Northwich called Containment Breach. It's the first time I've ever done that. I've never ever run an event myself. I've always been somebody who would attend, but never got involved in the organising. So I thought I'll step up and have a go at organising one. So looking forward to that.
That sounds interesting. I've been, Dead Zone. Well, I mean, I own an awful lot of Dead Zone. It looks marvellous and resplendent and organised in its boxes. That's interesting.
It's not the best use of it in its boxes, Neil.
No. It does need to. It does need to come out and get done at some point. It's not on the immediate list. However, that is something I could be tempted out to kind of put a little warband together and go and do something with.
It is an excellent game. I mean, I'm a Pathfinder for Mantic. I don't get paid by them to say this. It's just a really good science fiction game in 3D, if you like, because it works in the cubes system. So you can go horizontal or vertical. The factions that you can choose, you can. There's something for everybody there. There's a couple of new factions that have come out recently. They follow a model of releasing a new book once per year, which updates the rules, updates the scenarios, introduces one or two new bits and pieces. But every faction within the game will get something for them, whether it's a new bit of equipment or a new model. There's a rebalancing across the factions so that the rules committee will look back over the 12 months of play and from the feedback over the various fanatic groups on Facebook to see what might be undercosted or might be too powerful, and they'll sort of rein that in. So there's a reset once per year. The second version of that has just come out called Escalation, which Andy Sharp was the author of. Dr. Dead Zone, who's Gary's brother who runs Black Dragon. He'd be well worth if you wanted to do a section on Dead Zone in a future cast, he would be the go-to guy to talk about it essentially. But it's got a real solid following now. Dead Zone has. It's a real solid game, very fair, very quick, and lots of factions to choose from. So highly recommended. It fills that niche of the science fiction skirmish game that Necromunda sits in as well, I guess, and one or two other low model counts science fiction skirmish games where you need probably 12 to 15 models on the table.
Yeah.
But the mechanics are great. It's a sound system that you pick up very quick. It's one of these easy to learn, difficult to master games. Yeah. So played 4 games of that down at Black Dragon in Hinckley, and then at one of the other clubs that's in the general Stoke-on-Trent area, which is closest to me, had a game of Kings of War Vanguard, which is this fantasy skirmish game from Mantic set in the Kings of War universe. That's an excellent little game. And other than that, I'm struggling to think. So no other games. So that's about my hobby update, really.
Cool. Thank you. Mr. Hobbs.
Oh, well, not much really. Obviously, we had Terraforming Mars with yourselves this weekend. Mm-hmm. Before that, Journey to the Forests with Matt and Ralph. Hello, chaps.
Hi, guys.
And we played Chain of Command using Matt's rather lovely desert terrain, the little village. Which I was a bit with my heavy armor of a Vickers Mark V against the pesky Italians.
Oh, was that the Shawaddy game?
That was the one. Yeah.
Yes.
That looked excellent. I saw the pictures on Twitter. It looked really good, really impressive.
It was a good, fun game. I really like early war. When a boy's anti-tank rifle is your big weapon. it's good. So, great game with that. And then last night, again, trip to the forest. This time with Mark came along, and we had another game of Stargrunt, which was good fun. This time we used calling in assets, so we had we had the ability to call in troops off table coming in through VTOLs or in APCs. We also had artillery, which we didn't bother to use because we had just far too much fun crashing VTOLs into the landing area and killing everybody. So yeah, good fun game.
What more could you ask for?
It was one of those of, is there any rules for crashing a spaceship into the landing rules? And whilst Ralph was busy trying to find the rules, Matt was shooting my VTOL, which I left over the top of him with his RPG, and yeah, it crashed.
Excellent.
Stargrunt is such a. I mean, it is one of those. It's 25 years old ish, and it's a classic game which holds its own against the latest iteration of rules. Oh, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Excellent game. I like the dice. I think the dice are nicely coloured. So
they're the wrong colours.
Oh, let it go. So painting. Oh, I just remember something else that turned up, which I should have mentioned in the confessional.
Yes.
Very important. Polyversal.
Ooh.
My polyversal factions have turned up. So the rules will be following on later.
Yeah.
I had a nice box off Byron, which had 5 factions in it and some nice stretch goal terrain and stuff.
Lots of 6mm sci-fi goodness.
Lots and lots of 6mm sci-fi goodness from lots of different manufacturers, all matched together. It's very nice. So they'll be going off to Vlad to be painted. and yes, I have told him. So back to my painting. Reaver Titan, as I've mentioned, that's been done. I got 2 Warhounds on the go. To be next. Keeping on the theme of Titans, I painted a Titan from Mythic Battles. Atlas.
Oh yes, you finished your Atlas figure. That was a stonking figure. That looked awesome.
Yeah, it's lovely. Enjoyed that. I'm in the middle of picking up some Knights for Tempest Titanicus, so I should soon have enough to do a nice little game. So we'll be playing that soon. I've started up on some of the Lord of the Rings orcs, so I've just got 6 on my table to practice my colours and how I'm going to paint them. I painted up another batch of 6mm terrain pieces for the big Rommel project, which I'm going to be working up to soon. So, that's it really. I'm just getting everything ready so I can sit down one weekend. All the vehicles done, all the infantry will be done. Thanks, Vlad. All the train bits will be done. Got all the bases. Sit down, base them all up, and then do the Russians.
What company have you used for those, Mike?
Well, for the figures.
Yeah, for the Rommel.
The vehicles are all GHQ from a very old army of mine, which I've had for years. So, yeah, I went a bit mad on Germans about 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Easy done.
So much so I did, do you know Spearhead, the rules?
Yeah, very well, yeah.
Yeah, I did a couple of divisions in Spearhead.
Impressive.
Yeah.
That's one word for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot. So, and I did them all.
Especially with GHQ.
Well, I started off using HR. And then I picked up some GHQ and thought, oh, these are nice. I took some bobs through eBay sales and stuff, and then suddenly I had a lot. Yeah.
Should we go back to the confessional?
No, never go back. So now I've taken all of those vehicles off their old basics. They're all on 25mm bases. They've all been done. tidied up. I'd get a load of the Bacchus German infantry painted by Vlad. I bought some of the Adler artillery crews. I got all the little terrain pieces like sandbags and walls and stuff like that. So literally, I can just put it together. I've done a few test bases, so off we go. I'm going to nick the Gareth Beamish from ADC Painting's technique of making roll bases. Got my little, my little flock of applicator. So yeah, it's all going to be good.
Have you got a one of the electronic static grass applicators?
Yeah.
Have you seen the little device that Peter Berry sells?
I was looking at that in one of those on Sunday, and I couldn't for the life of me work out how it was meant to work. What is it?
Right, nor me, to be honest. But
it looks like a little puffer thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. You know Peter Berry far better than me, you two. And I was at the Phalanx show, as previously mentioned, and I'm standing in front of him with a box of British and a box of German World War I figures for my project next year. And I seemed to go into sort of a trance as he was talking to me, and suddenly this Huff Puff appeared in my hand, and I was handing him the money for it. I'm not quite sure what happened. There's some hypnotic thing.
Yeah, it's a common issue you have when you visit the Bacchus stand. Peter has this unearthly power. Yeah, yeah.
The words I think were, "It'll be the best £2 you spend today." So I get home and I look at my my haul and see this little plastic concertina thing. I think, oh goodness me, what do I do with this now? I will say now, it works. It is really, really good. So essentially all you do is you take the lid off, the little plastic lid, put your static grass inside it, trim the nozzle down a little bit so that there's an aperture there for the grass to come through, and then apply PVA to your base, put the Huff Puff over it, and just, if you could see me now, I'm doing the action, which must look very odd, but I'm sat in the dark and I'm doing the action. If you can picture this now, I've got one of those Huff Puffs in my hand, and you just squeeze the concertina. It's like a very about 2 inches cylinder, 2 inches tall cylinder that's concertina. You squeeze the concertina down, and it just pushes the grass out, and what it does is makes the grass stand up, so it's not sort of squashed down on the base in the PVA. As you push it down, I don't know if there's a bit of static charge added during the action. I'm not quite sure, but it certainly makes the majority of the grass stand vertical, and it's a lovely effect for £2.
Lovely.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. Yeah, so and that's basically me, nice and quick.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Right. Well, in that case, then we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the main subject of the show. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is proud to be sponsored by Firestorm Games. Whether you need wargames rules, miniatures, paints, hobby accessories, scenery, board games, card games, all your role-playing needs, and even toys and collectibles, Firestorm Games is your store of choice. Check them out at www.firestormgames.co.uk or at their stores located in Cardiff, Newport and Swindon. Don't forget, if you use the code SUMMERYMeeple, that's SUMMERYMEEPLE, all case, you will get an extra discount on your order. Firestorm Games, for all your hobby goodness. So there we were, minding our own business, and next thing you know, we've been mugged by Pear, and convinced that actually we really need to go and see this game that he's putting on at Joy of Six this year, Poltava. Which, if you've been following Pear or you've listened to the show we did a few weeks ago, you'll know Pear's been working on this small project, with a 16 by 5 table, and more trees than is sanely conceivable in a single. It's huge. Anyway, so bottom line is, last weekend, several of us came together, ostensibly to go to Joy of Six. Although we said, well, I'll tell you what, since we're all going to Joy of Six, we'll meet up the day before and we'll have a game and go for a curry.
Yeah.
So we did.
Mm-hmm.
Which Mr. Hobbs then reminded me, said, "Oh, we did that last year." And it was like, "Oh, did we?" I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. Last year we knew we'd been invited up because we were on a panel last year.
Yeah, we knew all about it.
We knew all about that.
Yeah.
So we'd organised it.
Yeah.
Whereas this year, we'd organised to go to Joy of Six because we thought Joy of Six is a lovely event. And we went up because we wanted to see this particularly awesome game that Pear put on, and look at the show. And as it turned out, it was a good job that we attended it, since apparently I was on another panel, as I discovered when I read the when I read the program after I arrived. And somebody else was meant to be on the panel as well, but
refused. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I made a stand. I made a stand for good manners and ethics. If you want, Mr. Berry, if you're listening, if you want me to come on a panel, you ask me. Hello, they give me the excuse to hide in the back and heckle.
As I say, the next time you refuse to come on, you refuse to go on a panel, just don't to the seminar. You git. Yes. Anyway, so and funny enough, it was there we bumped into Shaun.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, we wanted to have a chat a bit about the Joy of Six show and the consequences of attending. It has been hinted that the confession might not be everything. But there was some consequences. There were some interesting things we saw, interesting things we found out. So we thought we'd have a discussion on the show and basically everything involved. So, who'd like to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry,
you're the guest.
Oh, very polite. Thank you very much. I'm not used to this up in Stoke.
You got 5 minutes, no more. I was going to right?
Yeah, good.
Set the timer now. I'll just echo what you said there, Neil. I think Joe 6 seems to have a unique feel to it, a unique atmosphere around it. Not quite sure why that is, other than the fact it's a niche within a niche within a niche, isn't it? Of 6mm lovers, people who really buy into the ethos that 6mm brings to the hobby, I guess. But it certainly has a different feel to me to your usual shows, your partisans or your salutes or colours or whatever. As good as all those shows are, there seems to be a more of a community feel that we're all in it together and we're all there for very similar reasons. I've only actually been to one previous Joy of Six, which was in the old venue. I was trying to think how long ago that was, probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, that was the one with on the 2 floors.
Yes.
Yes. Where if you're on the first floor, you could actually look over and look top down on the game that was below you.
That's right, because there was that huge Somme game, wasn't there? I think about 20 foot long.
Yeah.
Battle of the Somme. When there's some pictures of that online if you look closely enough. But I persuaded a friend of mine from the club, Aid, to join me on the journey up there. I'd gone I was wearing 2 hats really. As you've already mentioned, I had the idea of launching this 6mm dedicated podcast. So I wanted to try and spread the word and just see what was out there, get 1 or 2 interviews of various people and sort of network, I guess, to spread the word. But also just because I had such a good time 3 or 4 years ago, I've got this passion, this burning passion around 6mm, and I just wanted to be part of what that day was. So it wasn't going to be a big shopping day for me particularly, but clearly Pear's game stood out as, I think, Mike, you said it best actually on one of your tweets, that it's, I forget the exact words, but it's something along the lines of the best 6mm you'd ever seen, something along those lines. It's just incredible, wasn't it? I followed the development of the game. It's always difficult to get a grasp on the scale and just how much Pear had put into that. And it was almost like the whole was far greater than some of the parts, if you know what I mean. We'd seen each little bit as he developed it, and you're thinking, crikey, this is going to make a good game. But when he'd laid it out, it was just incredible, wasn't it? It was just totally, and it's probably one of the best games I've ever seen, regardless of scale, at any convention over the 30 odd years I've been traveling up and down the country to various shows. It was just stunning. Words don't do it justice. But not only that, there was lots of other games as well, which people have put a lot of effort into, from the crazy, unbelievably mad game Brexit the Riot Years, or Riot the Brexit Years. I don't know if you saw that. That was bonkers, that game was.
Yeah, I can't. Yes, I did kind of see that going. I'm sorry, what?
It was. Yeah. I did sit down at it because it was a participation game, and so me and Aid sat down for about 20 minutes, and by the time we got up again to leave, neither of us had a clue what the heck had gone on in that 20 minutes. So there's lots of dice rolling, lots of shouts about what was going on in the game. It was just completely bonkers. But so from that extreme through to Pear's game and everything in between, I thought the quality of games was outstanding. Special mention, I think, for me, to the Jacobite-sized Culloden, using the for King and Parliament rules. That was lovely. There was a Vimero game. There was South London Warlords have put on a 30-core dash up the Hell's Highway to the Somme Bridge. That was incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
The seminars were great. I went to both seminars, actually. I went to the one in the morning, which was the update on where backers are going in the next 12 months or so. And we didn't sign an NDA, so I feel okay to talk about it. You know, it was a free to enter seminar for anybody who wanted to attend. So Peter talked about Pony Wars range, which is coming out later this year. He talked about First World War and Second World War aeroplanes that he's going to be adding to the 20th century ranges. And he had an example of a Spitfire to pass around. That looked absolutely glorious. But yeah, the whole vibe for me just was friendly. There was a lovely atmosphere, incredibly hardworking backroom staff that Peter had got on his team, Peter and the crew to set the thing up. I thought the venue was great. I know we struggled to get something to eat, didn't we? When we were talking, we sat down and they were just shutting the canteen. But I did get a bacon sandwich in the morning, which was very nice. I just thought from start to finish, it's rare that I stay to a show until the doors close. And I was there till the doors closed. Normally, I'm about 2:30, 3 o'clock. I'm ready to go. I've seen everything, but I was there for the duration, and I thought it was absolutely splendid.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, as you say, it's. I was going to say it's a small show, but that's no pun intended. It's a medium-sized show. There was a nice mix of traders and games. Probably more games there. That's the standard of the games. I thought was really outstanding.
Yes.
There was a really nice sort of multi-table Desert War game, which looked really interesting.
Yeah, that was really kind of showing like fog of war, wasn't it? So yeah, so basically different things were happening on each table. They kind of affected each other, but it was all done from you may not know what's happening. Yes.
That was by the D-Side Defenders, who run a blog. I think it's called the Wargaming Site. I'm not quite sure. I'll pass a link on to you anyway. But they quite regularly run whole day games, which are operational level games, they call them, where they might have 10 6x4 tables in the hall that are ongoing simultaneously, and each table will have an impact on all the other tables. So they've just done Arnhem, I know, as a club effort. And I'd seen that they were bringing the desert game to the show, and I agree with you. That looked really interesting.
Yeah, it's minimal sort of terrain on it because obviously in the desert, but it just looked really interesting. It was a great little idea. Our friends from the Collection Calculator were there.
How could I forget that? Yes.
Yeah, with their award-winning Little Bighorn.
Is that an award-winning game they have there?
I believe they won an award. They did point towards it a few times. But yeah, nice to have and that's a great little participation game.
It's brilliant. I'm so gutted. I wanted to play that game, and I missed the chance because time just ran away with me. But I did get a short interview with Peter about it for the God's Own Scale podcast. So he's clearly a man with a passion. Very enthusiastic, and I agree. Incredible
yeah,
game.
That was great. But there was games everywhere, and there was really good quality games. And we bumped into old friends, Lord S. and Martin from Grip and Beast.
Oh, indeed, that was a surprise.
Yeah, who were there with their. They're new to come out. I think it's coming out in November. Game of Miletti's Mundi, which is based on Sword Point, but for large battles at sort of 6 mil scale. So it's element based. It's not figure removal. It's quick. It's using the similar army list that they've got already.
Now, I thought that was a stroke of genius when they turned around and said, "Oh well, okay, well, yeah," because we were obviously we quizzed them quite a bit on various different bits and pieces, and they turned around and went, "Well, we're using the same army lists because we've got them all already. So we're developing this other game in conjunction with what we've already done with Sword Point, but we're just kind of." Essentially zooming out a bit.
Yeah, and basically they're going to be releasing 10 mil armies as well. I think they're starting with the later Romans and the Parthians, I think. I could be wrong, but yeah, they're doing those in 10 mil. And now they're using the same sculptor who sculpted their 10 mil World War I armies, which are now being used in Great Escape Games 1914 game. And those are spectacular. So, yeah, that'll be one to look out for. Yeah, it was a friendly, laid back game, and we spent a lot of time just chatting. We just sort of sat down. There's loads of people that we knew, and yeah, just enjoying the vibe.
It was one of those shows there where actually you got to see everything, but yeah, at the same time it was amazing when you sort of think actually, yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, well, what's spent? I mean, quick shout out, hello, Carl Burks. We kind of ended up having lunch with Carl, and just lots of time chatting. Obviously, ended up chatting with Shaun. And what have you, and then we had this seminar, which I believe was recorded and will be turning up on YouTube at some point, rather scarily, with myself, a certain Mr. Guy Bowers of Wargame Soldiers and Strategy, and the aforementioned Per Broden, talking about, well, it was basically a Q&A, trends in the hobby, and that was it. Kind of go from there, really. It became a bit of a free for all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was an interesting little seminar. I thought you did very well.
I thought it was excellent. I thought it was excellent. Yeah, there was a bit of heckling, wasn't there, coming from the crowd?
Yeah, it was. Put it like, it was one of those seminars where I certainly learned to think on your feet. I think. But yeah, apparently that is that was recorded, and will be appearing on some form of social media sometime in the near future. So when it appears, I'll stick a link out for it.
And of course, the other thing we saw there was and I've forgotten the guy's name.
It's Mike's Painting Clinic.
How do you know I was going to go there?
Right, okay.
You're like an old married couple, you two.
Oh, we finish each other's.
Yeah. Now, I think Mike tends to tour primarily around the kind of Midlands and more northern shows. I'm not quite sure if he. I must admit, I've only seen him at things like Partisan.
He's from Burton. He's from Burton.
Right, cool. So
East Midlands,
yeah, I think he does. I think he tends to do shows local to him. I'm not sure if he travels much down south. However, and he's known for going to shows and doing a painting clinic. That painting clinic is basically turning around and saying, "This is how you paint 6mm miniatures," or "This is what you can achieve easily painting 6mm miniatures." And he turns up and he paints all day, and he invites you to sit down with him and say, "This is how you do it." However, he had some very interesting experiments he was carrying out this time round, which we'll come on to in a second, because I'm sure Mr. Hobbs will talk about it. But the other thing is, and this is something I know about, is he has some connection, whether it's just a case of they're friends or what have you, with a certain company, Vanguard Miniatures, who produce a range of 6mm and 3. Well, actually, multiple scales. I think it's 15, 6, and 3, isn't it? I don't think they did 28s yet. But sci-fi miniatures range. We have talked about these in the past. Mike was aware of them. However, he'd never seen them in the flesh. So I led Michael by the hand and said, "Oh, look, come and have a look at these."
I had to go have a lie down afterwards. Oh, they're just beautiful. And it's not just the painting, which is excellent, but they're just beautiful. Yeah. I may have placed a small order since seeing them. It just reaffirmed my mad idea of doing Horus Heresy in 6mm using Apocalypse, because they were just great.
We had a bit of a Twitter storm on Sunday night, did we not?
It all got very confusing. You see, what happened was, now Ralph was very interested in playing Epic. So Matt and Ralph both wanted to play Epic, and I said, yeah, we can do that on one of our regular Tuesday nights. I've got enough stuff. My 7 armies or so. Matt's got a few bits as well. So we were just talking about doing Epic. 40k Epic. And as I was driving back home with Ralph, we were talking about sort of armies he could use, ones all that sort of stuff. And then when I got home, I then sort of mentioned about doing Apocalypse in the Horus Heresy, and it got very confused. It was like, what game are we playing? Are we doing Apocalypse? Are we doing that Epic? Are we doing this? Are we doing 40k? Are we doing this? I'm like, hang on. I want to do this. You don't want to do that. You go and do that. I'm going to do this. And then Neil jumped in and said, do I have to buy a complete legion for Armageddon? Which completely confused everybody. So...
yes, well, yes, quite. And yes, and my question was, do I just have to buy a company, or do I have to buy an entire chapter?
I think it's best you buy nothing, mate. Because you're just confusing us all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. A month. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting lost on the Vanguard website now. My goodness.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, I'm gone.
We've lost Shaun. Yeah.
Send help.
So just to let listeners know, this may actually be the second purchase during the podcast.
It's costing me a lot of money. This is. Should be a health warning.
People don't come onto Meeples lightly.
I know that now.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yeah, but this painting clip, the some of the figures he's painted is really interesting. It's excellent quality. Just watching him work, and he was playing around with the contrast paints, and there's a lot of chat about contrast. I think they're going to be useful for stuff. As far as I'm concerned, they're another tool in the arsenal for painters.
100%.
Yeah, you might get some. If people want to use them for everything, brilliant. I might use them for doing some glazes or some sort of. I've seen some nice effects of using it to blend over colours, sort of blend it down a bit. So, are they the best thing ever? No. Are they useful? Yep. Will I buy a few? More than likely. The white looks really good.
I've tried the white. I bought 3 or 4 of them. I succumbed to the hype. And you're absolutely right there, Mike. They're not revolutionary. I think to a 13-year-old coming into the hobby, they will be revolutionary, because that 13 or 14-year-old will be able to paint some Space Marines fairly quickly, and they will look okay. They will look pretty good. I think for seasoned hobbyists like ourselves, they're, as you say, they're just another tool in the bag, aren't they?
Yeah.
Has anybody been able to? Is anybody able to find anybody that currently has the black in stock?
No.
I've got the black. I own the black.
Okay, so are you auctioning it off for several times the price?
No, because I had a spillage accident, unfortunately.
Oh no! No.
And it was like liquid gold spread all over my painting table. But
hang on, because this is the problem. Because obviously, considering the difference in cost with contrast paints, having a spillage suddenly becomes a serious issue.
The finance minister within the household wasn't very happy. The Siberian gulags were awaiting me, I think. It's the black is okay. It is okay, but it doesn't do for me. And I feel a bit grumpy saying this. For me, it doesn't do anything that the paints I already own do already. I've tried it on some Dead Zone figures, actually, the black and the white. And as to contrast the two, I painted one with the black and the white contrast paints, and that wasn't I slipped contrast in twice there, didn't I? Sorry about that. And then I painted another one using my regular paints. Both took about the same amount of time, to be honest, if I'm honest. And you'd struggle to say which one was which. But I won't be negative. I don't like negativity in the hobby. They will fill a purpose, and yes, that's the end of my statement.
I was going to say that Mike had some sort of 6mm figures, and he just painted them up with different contrast colours to look at them afterwards. And as a block coat down, it was quite interesting.
It was.
You could see the detail there. It had the colour there. Wasn't too bright or too dark. I thought, as a base, that's it's not a bad little idea.
I think some of the colours are a little bit better than others, aren't they? On those figures, they were American Civil War Bacchus figures that he put those colours on, and certainly the browns for a Confederate infantryman, they did look really nice.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing with what Games Workshop have been talking about, and especially the way the official way you're meant to paint with them, which is kind of like slap on loads, it doesn't wouldn't appear to be, on the face of it, conducive to painting at such a small scale.
No, right. I think you've got to have some skill to be able to pull the paint off afterwards. I think that's what I'm hearing is you can apply it quite thick because you want to get it all over. You don't want to be in any gaps, but then you need to use a brush to sort of take away the excess and leave, so you're sort of pulling the paint down as you would do with a wash. So you put a wash on it, you need to pull some of the wash away, otherwise it'll pull in the bottom. So it's a bit of that. It's a lot of hype, but they've released a complete range of very nice, thicker glazes, I suppose you could call them. And if they're useful, they're useful. Cool.
But it was an interesting exercise to see them to see them used at that scale, and suddenly you think, oh, hang on a minute, that's interesting. Yeah, it's just really interesting. It's just, but yeah, there's. I think as we've already said, and I think we said in the previous one, there's obviously it's the next big thing, and GW seem to have spent an awful lot of their current marketing budget in pushing this out and what have you, and interesting stuff. But don't necessarily believe everything that you read or everything that you've watched.
No. But, if you're interested, grab a couple of pots, see how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly grabbed a couple to have a play with, and I've grabbed a pot of a medium to have a play with. So obviously, when I get round to painting another figure next year sometime, I'll be able to talk about it a bit more.
Yeah.
Just as another shout out there for Dr. Mike with that painting clinic. You're right. He's great. He's a great proponent of getting people to sit down, and we all know the old adage that Peter trots out that he faces every show he goes to. That says, "I couldn't paint anything so small." Well, Dr. Mike shows you absolutely you can. It gets back to that mindset thing about 6mm for me, where you paint the unit and not the man. And he's great at it. And I've sat down a couple of times with him over the years, and he's shown one or two different techniques. I know he uses the Winsor & Newton inks, nut brown or peat brown, as his magic wash. And for anybody painting 6mm, that is the talent in a tin. That we used to say Devlin Mud was, or Agrax Earthshade from the GW stable, but the Winsor & Newton inks that he uses really are fantastic for 6mm.
So yeah, Joy 6, good show. If anyone's in Sheffield next year, just go along. It's a great little show.
Definitely.
So, but off the back of that, obviously, and actually, as part of the seminar, we were chatting, and I mean, it's something I said at the seminar last year. It's something I reiterated this year. When you start talking about how you publicise the hobby, or how do we get the hobby out there, and how do you publicise different scales and what you're doing. And I very much turned around and said, don't rely on the mainstream magazines. If you want, I mean, you can certainly, if you've got something to say, put yourself, write an article and put it forward through there. But, I turned around and said, we are in an age, we have never had so much access to a global communication network, and the ease of accessibility and the ease of production. So I turned around and said, if you want it to happen, take a bit of responsibility and go and do it. And at that point, Peter turned around and went, oh yeah, like Shaun's done with the new 6 mil podcast. Now, I'd happened to notice. I must admit, I wasn't aware it was you, Shaun, at the time, but I'd happened to notice that this newfangled 6 mil podcast called God's Own Scale had popped up on my Twitter feed. Then Peter turned around and said, "Oh yeah, it's this guy, and it's Shaun, who I have subsequently twigged that we have actually previously had chats with each other." Yes, because my brain is just fuzzled and I'm old.
We're all getting old.
Anyway, but so, yes, we do. Yes, we have communicated in the past, and obviously, as we know, Shaun is a fan of the show. Thank you, sir. However, so we thought as part of this, we'd like to have a quick chat with Shaun and say, right, so okay, 6 mil podcast. What was the idea? Why are you doing it? What's your aim? And where are we going with it? And then when can we get a hold of it? So tell us all about this brand new podcast that you're putting together.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on to talk about it, both of you. It's joking aside, I have listened to this podcast for many years, going back to when episode numbers were in single figures. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not a board gamer, but
I pity you. Going, if you've been listening for that long, crikey, I think back and think, just how bad was it in the early years? Oh.
Do you know what? Earlier today, I was looking at a war games blog called Heretical Wargaming, which is, I don't know the name of the guy. He identifies himself as Whirlwind on various forums, but I've no idea who he is or what he looks like. But he's primarily a 6 mil gamer, primarily using Polymos rules, actually. And I was going back through some of his old blog posts, back to, I think it's something like 2012, and he reviews the first 2 or 3 Meeples episodes, actually. I think episode 1, reviewing Victory at Sea, and he sort of talks about, he's very positive, actually. Don't worry, Neil. Get your head out your hands. He's very positive about the podcast. But that, and was that something like 2007, 2008 or something like that?
That was it. Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Can I just get that name again of the blog?
Heretical Wargaming.
Carry on.
Yeah. And it's in one of his very early posts. In fact, it might be in his first 2 or 3 posts back in 2012. So he's 5 years on from the generation of the podcast. But anyway, so just to continue the thanks, this Meeples and Miniatures, I'm sure I'm not alone in the fact that it has accompanied me through good times and bad times, ups and downs in my hobby life and my real life. It's accompanied me through painting thousands of figures. It's accompanied me on the journey to and from shows up and down the country, wherever they may be. And it's great to have that connection. And I think I mentioned to you on Sunday, it's a little bit like sitting down with a couple of mates in the pub and just talking hobby, because as wargamers, probably next to playing and painting, we like talking about the hobby, don't we? And communicating. Yeah, hence this podcast. So I can't say that I've identified a sort of gap in the market, but this comes back to my love for the scale of 6mm. It's not my only scale, but it's certainly my favourite at the moment, and it meets a need for me to be able to recreate these historical games, as I mentioned. So I thought I'll just have a trawl around the various websites to see what coverage we've got. I've been aware of Bacchus since almost day one, I guess, from when they were a scenery manufacturer back in the day, and look through the current glossy magazines to see what coverage there was there, see what coverage we got on podcasts, on YouTube, across the whole spectrum of media that's available to us now. And we are in a golden age of media, aren't we? I think, with the hobby that connects us and brings us together. But what I did see was that there isn't an awful lot of 6mm content out there. I think you have Peter on your show fairly regularly, if not once a year, more than a couple of times a year maybe, to talk about what he's doing. And I know yourself, Neil, and Mike, you talk very favourably about 6mm when it's relevant to a hobby project that you've got on the go. But elsewhere, there's not an awful lot of discussion or mention or momentum around the 6mm side of the hobby. There's a new YouTube channel called Little Wars TV. I don't know if either of you have seen that. But they use 6mm.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. The production values on it are outstanding as a YouTube channel, as a hobby YouTube channel. You wouldn't be surprised to see it at 9 o'clock on BBC Two, for instance. It's that good. And they do quite a lot of 6mm gaming, and they promote it, but it's few and far between. You've got the likes of Pear, who takes his big game down to Salute and puts that on. But when Peter blogs or tweets or writes on the Bacchus forum to say that he's just got back from a show, and once again a customer stood at at his stand looking at the figures and said, "Oh, these are too small," or "I can never paint anything this small," or "Come on, let's go find a 28mm manufacturer." I cannot imagine what that feels like for Peter, who puts his absolute heart and soul into the hobby, and producing these miniature masterpieces. I bought the 3 glossy magazines last week for the first. I actually haven't bought a magazine this year, I don't think, out of the 3 major glosses that we have. And I couldn't find one mention of 6mm in there. I'm aware that John Treadway was on the panel last year, wasn't he, at Joy of 6, that you two were involved in. And he put out that plea for articles to say, you need to step up, and if you produce the article and it's good enough, we'll put it in the magazine. So my question almost, and I mentioned this in the morning seminar, and I think I mentioned it in the afternoon as well. Why aren't people stepping up and contributing? Editors can only publish what they're provided with, the articles that they're provided with. And I know we had the discussion around photography is difficult. I'd challenge that slightly. I don't think you need massively expensive equipment to take good photos of 6mm. You made a very good comment, actually, Neil, that I think with 6mm, the scenery becomes almost as important, doesn't it, to set the scene? But yeah, I think with sorry, go on.
No. Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that with the scale of miniature, it doesn't photograph in the same way as a 15, 20 or 28 mil miniature does. So you have to put it within a slightly different context.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with that. But if you look at Peter's website, if you look at Pear's Twitter feed or his roller1.com blog, there's some fantastic pictures on there and I describe it as one of those old masterpiece artworks that hang in various galleries of a battle scene where you've got a couple of generals in the forefront, and there's usually a dead bloke at the feet and a couple of staff officers and somebody with the hand on the forehead. And then behind them is this rolling vista of battle going on. There's one in particular I think of with Marlborough, the Duke of Marlborough at Blenheim. There's a fantastic painting that is similar to what I've just described, where these two armies are clashing in the background, and the focus is on John Churchill on his horse with a few of his aides, and etc. But 6mm for me provides you that rolling vista of battle, similar to those masterpieces of art. So I do challenge slightly the fact that it's difficult to difficult to photograph these figures. You need to work at it, and you've got to, like painting them, you've got to photograph the unit and not the individual figure. So in a 28mm scene, you can focus in on a button or a lapel, or some incredible detail where somebody's done 10 highlights on somebody's cuff of a Napoleonic figure. But on a 6mm scene, you're photographing the unit within that scenery. You've got to set the scene with building trees or whatever to make it look good, but I do think it can be done. Mm-hmm. So it is up to the 6mm community to step up, I think, and produce the content for people to see and to spread the gospel, evangelize about the scale. Hence why I came up with the idea of the podcast. Now, a 6mm podcast is, I've used this phrase before, or it's a niche within a niche. Yourselves as Meeples are a general hobby podcast. You cover historical games, you cover science fiction, fantasy, you cover board games, you cover a wide variety of issues, and it's almost like a magazine in audio, isn't it? Yeah. Where you have your chosen subject for each episode. So a 6mm podcast dedicated to the 6mm hobby is going to appeal, I guess, to fewer people than the likes of yourselves, which have got that general appeal. But what I would hope is that if I can get the right people onto the podcast to talk about the scale and the hobby of 6mm, whether that be Per, whether that be Peter, whether it be Ian Kay at Regular Miniatures, or the guys at Rapier, or I forget the guy's name who runs Little Wars TV, Greg something. He's the author of the rule set Outtro of Freedom, which I know that you talked about on the podcast with that guy, Mr. Whitaker back in the day. Yeah. And if I could get him on to talk about it and to sort of promote it, you will have seen over Twitter, I've created the God's Own Scale Twitter feed to, I don't like the word spam, but to try and promote. Yeah, it's promotion, not spam, isn't it? I'm just trying to get the word that this exists out there. It's very difficult, isn't it, to get these things off the ground? I mean, you've been going at it 12 years now, Neil, and I'm sure at various points.
And it's still a case of every show I get people who, I've just come across your podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
And and here we are, as I say, we're 12 years, say 2007 sort of thing. So you're a niche within a niche. So you have a mountain to climb in some ways, as far as getting getting the word out there, which, to be honest, is one of the reasons why we're talking about it now.
Yes, and I thank you for that.
Because at least it's a case of it helps to get the word out there.
Yeah. So I am certainly not putting myself up as an expert or the voice of 6mm. That isn't the reason for this. This isn't a vanity project. This is about evangelizing for the scale, and if Peter benefits from that, or for regular or rapier or heroics or whoever it's Scotia, whoever the manufacturer is, gets some benefit of it, and it gets. So me coming on here, for instance, is going to reach a far wider audience than I will get in my first, however many, maybe more than I ever get listeners on the podcast, because so you have such a far wide-reaching audience. But I think it comes back to that point that you need to build it and they will come. So you need to write the articles to get into the magazines to show off the scale to its best advantage. You need to produce YouTube videos to show the scale to its best advantage. And there's precious little out there actually on YouTube. There's one or two channels that specialize in 6mm or review some figures or show you how to paint, but there's not an awful lot out there. And certainly within the podcast world, as I say, you as a general broad spectrum hobby podcast, do your bit to cover it as much as you can within the time you've got. But there's little else out there in the podcast world. There's little out there in the UK podcast world that covers historical gaming at all. You've got WSS, which is a great podcast, but again, a broad spectrum, has got a broad spectrum of topics. You've got Two Fat Lardies with Oddcast, which is absolutely brilliant. But that isn't, I don't see that as a vehicle to sell Two Fat Lardies products. It's a wide historical gaming cast, isn't it? That will cover various historical periods and how to game them. It's not necessarily a sales pitch for Two Fat Lardies. But outside of that, I'm just struggling now off the top of my head to think of anything else that covers the historical hobby in any sort of detail. There's dozens and dozens of podcasts that cover science fiction, fantasy, other geeky pursuits, films, comics, whatever. But purely historical and with an emphasis on 6mm, there's nothing out there. So that's where I'm trying to sit, I guess. And it won't be, I'm going to try not just to concentrate on the gaming. I want a little history section in there as well. So maybe choose a period of history to have a talk to a good friend of mine who's a history teacher and the closest to a professional historian I'll ever get. He will hopefully come on, and we've had a chat to talk about one or two subjects that he's interested in, albeit he's not a 6mm gamer, he's a 28mm gamer. He'll be on as a sort of historical perspective, and that'll just be a 10 or 15 minute section, I anticipate, just to give a précis or a sort of a quick insight into a particular historical period, and then maybe look how you could gain that in 6mm, what rules are out there, what figures are out there, what scenery is out there. But I certainly would like to get on the movers and shakers within the 6mm hobby, the producers of the figures, of the scenery. Leven Miniatures, they do some beautiful 6mm scenery. They were there on Sunday.
Yeah,
and they're absolutely stunning. Yeah, it really. There's a little model of Helm's Deep. I don't know if you saw that, a little diorama of Helm's Deep that I've seen at various shows, and I'm always drawn to that. I always wanted Helm's Deep in 28mm scale when I used to play the Lord of the Rings strategy battle game, but could never afford it, never had the space, never had the time to think about building it myself. But there it is in 6mm. It's absolutely stunning. Really, really. It might be 2mm. Actually, I can't quite remember, but it's a micro scale version of Helm's Deep, and I'd buy that and just put it on my shelf. To be honest, it is that nice. So I think that's where I'm coming from. That it's to get the information out there to potential people who are interested in gaming 6mm. I've had a lot of good feedback over the Twitter feed from people. Some people are saying, "Well, I've always liked the idea of 6mm, but I've never. It's too small for me. I can't paint anything that small. I don't know what rules you would use for it." My stock answer for that is use whatever rules you want. Use black powder. Use what you don't have to use rules that say for 6mm on it. use any rules, can't you? It's that mindset attitude, and I think there is a mindset that you can only play a certain type of game with 6mm, which comes back to that idea of a Western skirmish on a tea tray in your lap or on the coffee table. There's nothing to stop you doing that. Okay, it won't appeal to everybody, and you might need a strong pair of glasses, or you might have to make some compromises in how you play that. But you could play Dead Man's Hand with 6mm. You could play your chosen version of Western Skirmish, or you could play Chain of Command in 6mm. I Ain't Been Shot One, I think would work really well in 6mm, and I know some people play it in 6mm. You've done Saga in 6mm.
We've done Saga. Pear's done Sharp Practice in 6mm. And he's been, I think more recently, he's been looking at the Rampant set of rules. Yes,
yeah. So, and Pear talked about this actually, I think as well, during the seminar, to say that it is this mindset idea. There's nothing to say that you can't do it. If you want to do it, if you've got that passion, if you've got that germ of an idea, then run with it. Nobody is going to, the fashion police aren't going to come around and say, excuse me, that's a 28mm set of rules you're using there. You can't possibly use that for 6mm. But I think sometimes wargamers can get a bit staid and a little bit snooty about 6mm. Peter speaks to these people all the time at the shows. I really feel for him when he comes across these customers, and how he keeps his cool, I don't know, but he's had years of practice, hasn't he?
This is it.
But yeah, exactly. And he's one of the nicest guys in the hobby, isn't he? He's always got time to have a little chat with you about whatever you're doing, or within the hobby or within the scale. So yeah, the idea is maybe once a month, twice a month at the very most, just put out up to an hour's long cast, talking to people within the hobby. I put out episode 0 just as a sort of proof of concept, which is just me rambling away to myself, just to get the feed up and running. It can be found. It's now been accepted by iTunes, so you can find it in whichever podcast app you use. So Podcast Addict or Podbean or whichever your variant is, it'll be available. As I say, I'm hoping for a schedule of at least one a month, 2 if possible. And it's there to spread the word. Yeah, I don't expect to get thousands of downloads to it. But if it can fill a little niche and it can occupy somebody as they're painting a few figures of an evening, or similar to what you've done for me, if I can be that accompaniment en route to a show for an hour or 2 hours, or wherever you choose to listen to your podcast, if I can be that extra little voice that's out there to pass away a couple of hours, that'll do me.
Well, sounds perfect.
Brilliant. It does, and more power to you, mate. I mean, as I say, I've always said is that as I was saying, is that if you've got a passion for the hobby, and the best thing you can do is share it, and in whatever format you can find and you can enjoy.
Yeah. This hobby has given me a lifetime of enjoyment. I'm late 40s now. It was no joking aside. I can't remember a time when I've never gamed in some form or other. It's given me a heck of a lot of enjoyment over the years, and for me, it's finding some way to pay something back, which is why I became a Mantic Pathfinder. That's for no benefit of myself. That's to spread the word about some games that I really enjoy, and if I can recruit some new people into the hobby through doing that. For instance, at the first Partisan, I took a very young boy who was probably only 4 or 5 through a game with his dad. We didn't play the proper rules. I let him throw some dice, and he killed some people, and I made some explosion noises and daka daka daka, that sort of thing, and his eyes were lighting up as he's moving these figures across a board, and that was lovely to see. And his dad was really pleased. He was a lapsed gamer who was just coming back into the hobby. He went off and bought a copy of Dungeon Saga. I hope he has more luck getting through doors than you, Neil.
You just had to go there.
Yeah.
Oh, I was hoping you'd pick that one up. It was lovely just to think that little boy might now be on a journey of his own towards a lifetime of hobby joy. And if I can do that in some small way to promote the 6mm hobby and say you can do this, you can do the big battles like Pear or Robert Dunlop, who did the Nyla Lipa game, the Eastern Front World War I game, which was next to Pear on Sunday. That was amazing. Or that Brexit the Riot years, or Riot the Brexit years, whichever it was, equally as valid a game. You don't have to have a 16-foot by 5-foot table. You can have a table that's 12 inches square and play a little Western skirmish. If I can just enlighten people maybe to say, think outside the box a little bit, share that passion that I've got, this absolute burning passion. I listened to the podcast this morning, the latest episode, and I think it was Nick that said there's rarely an hour that goes by during his day where he isn't thinking about the hobby in some shape or form, whether he's doing it, painting, planning his next game, reading a book on the subject, or whatever. There's rarely an hour that goes by, and I'm similar. I've got a busy day job and I have to concentrate for the vast majority of it, or else I get into trouble. But in short down periods, I can think, I'll just have a quick look at this forum, or I wonder if I did this way, or what's this new book that's come out on this subject that I'm interested in. There's rarely an hour during a day where I'm not thinking about the hobby in some shape, way, or form. It's such a broad hobby, isn't it? From the artistry of putting the game on, to reading a book, to looking at a YouTube channel and listening to a podcast. So if I can just fill that very small gap that I've seen in the market, and 50 people download the episode, if 10 people download the episode, doesn't matter really to me. Hopefully those 10 people will get something out of it, and it might spur them on to play a 12-inch square table Western skirmish in 6mm, or put on a 16-foot by 5-foot extravaganza.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
I'm sure it'll go well. Start small.
Yeah.
And grow from there.
Yeah, I've got.
Start small. Is that meant to? It's
another little one, isn't it? Yeah, another little pun.
Boom, tish. Yeah.
You're too quick for me, Mike. Start small. Maybe that could be my tagline. God's own scale. Start small.
Cool. Okay, what we'll do, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it will be time to wrap up the show. Okay, so here we are, and it's time to wrap up the show. And as we come to this point, we would normally just do the what's Dave bought this week, but as Mr. Hobbs has just reminded us, we specifically avoided talking about what we bought at Joyous 6 during the confession, because we were going to talk about it during the Joyous 6 segment, and then he's failed to mention it, so it'll be a what has Dave bought this week, and what Hobbsy bought from Joyous 6. Which is almost the same thing, because basically what Dave bought this week was bought from Joyous 6. Okay, so, what's Dave bought this week?
He went a bit mad.
Three major things, two of which I kind of expected, one of which I was very left field, and is perhaps my fault, but I wasn't expecting him to do it. Okay, so, a while ago, and I think this followed. I think this was all your fault, Hobbsy, because you bought those. You bought those MTBs that you built when we were doing our painting weekend at Mr. Slade's.
Oh yeah.
And you brought the MTBs along, and he went, "Oh, they were nice," and so decided to buy the Cool Sea starter set, and that's kind of been bubbling under. And he's built a few ships. He's not done anything else with it yet. I'm still kind of waiting for a game, Dave, with some painted models, Dave. Anyway,
fancy not painting these Cool Seas models. He's had them for months.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
So,
really couldn't catch us doing that.
No, they're really quick to paint.
Yeah. Anyway, he bought 2 new fleets for Cool Seas, and he bought the American and Japanese fleets.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'm sorry. That was completely unexpected. So anyway, yes, he's bought a couple of fleets for Cool Seas, which was one unexpected move, and then the second unexpected move. Now, we had talked at some point about the For King and Parliament rules, and that it would be interesting to do them in 6mm, because that would seem to fit. And we've seen a couple of games, whether it's obviously there was that Jacobite game at Joy 6 this year. I've seen a couple in the past where they're using, they're playing the game on a small board. Basically, you can get away with playing it on especially in 6mm, on like a 2x3, and it looks great. Anyway, so I kind of been chatting to him at some point about this, and we hadn't really gone much past the chatting phase. I must admit I did kind of look, and I do have a spreadsheet somewhere.
Don't hold it for a second.
with a list of miniatures for a couple of armies. Next thing you know, Mr. Hickman is at the Bacchus stand purchasing. One thing Pete does very well is that he does actually do 6mm games in a box.
Very good quality.
Very good quality. So they come with a set of rules. They come with a set of polymorph rules. They come with two armies, 2 army packs, and usually some scenery. So there's normally a couple of buildings in there, and anyway, everything you need for the game: dice, lots. It is a game in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Dave bought the English Civil War one.
I hope he likes pies.
And apparently the English Civil War one is the Army of Montrose and the Lowland Scots. Because I was just going to go for Essex, and because Pete does 2 army packs, which at one point I must admit I was contemplating getting, except for the fact that by the time I got to the Bacchus stand, they'd all gone.
It was like a locust had gone through that stand, I think, on Sunday.
It was, and interestingly enough, I did happen to spot that the aforementioned Martin from Gripping Beast had actually bought one each of the army packs that I was actually after, but I won't hold that against him at all. Honest scuff. But no, so yes, Mr. Hickman, big investment in 6mm. And I looked at him and he kind of like, this is. Yeah, I'm not quite sure when these, where these are going in the painting list. So we shall see. One of us. Once
he's in, then he can't escape now. Hooks are in him.
This is it. So, Mr. Hobbs.
Hello.
Yeah, you paid a visit to the Bacchus stand amongst other things, didn't you?
I bought a few bits and bobs now. I'd like to support the small trader.
Boom, Tish. Yes.
So, there was one thing I was definitely looking for, which actually there was two things I was definitely wanting to get. I wanted to get some Katushkas from my Project Rommel.
Gesundheit.
So, and there's always a guy there who sells an awful lot of GHQ products, so I went to see him. I picked up 2 packs of Katushkas. And I also got the Micro-Armor GHQ rules, the second edition. So I've got the first edition, and they were quite interesting, so I thought I'd get the second edition to have a look at them. Whether I play them, God knows better. Yeah.
That's what South London Warlords were using for the 30-core dash up Hell's Highway. That's the rules they were using.
Yeah, I remember them being quite good, because you basically got an hour. He basically comes, the guy who writes them sort of says, most conflicts would take place over an hour, and then fight would just withdraw, regroup, and then go in again. So, yeah, they were nice rules, so I picked those up. I also popped to Rapier. Me and Ralph went to Rapier, because I've got this long-running project of doing Glorantha in 6mm.
Yeah.
So I was looking for another force for if anyone knows about Glorantha and Quest and stuff, there's one of the cults in there is called Yalmalio, which is sort of has a Greek theme. So I've got some Seleucids. I've got a little starter army of Seleucids, and Rapier do lovely little starter armies. They're about £13. And you've got enough there for, a dozen bases of figures. It's a good selection as well. So
I can't wait to see that, Mike. Glorantha and RuneQuest are one of my favourite fantasy backgrounds ever, actually. Did you get some 6mm brew a good while ago? Is that right?
No, I got the Scorpion Men and the Bison Riders.
Ah, that was right, yes. I think there are brew available, aren't there, from somewhere?
Not sure, but Rapier got some nice plans for over the next 2 years. They're going to be releasing quite a few. They concentrate on packs, which is one of the areas in.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So, they got lots of stuff coming out. So I think I'm using Assyrians for the Lunar Empire. So I'm halfway through those, and I'll get the solutions on as well.
When they're done, Mike, you'll have to come on a certain 6mm dedicated podcast and talk about it.
Oh, you'll have to speak to my agents. They're very fussy about me going on to a podcast.
I'll get my people to speak to his people.
Yeah, I'm allowed one a year. But yeah, so got those. And that's all I was really after. And then the Warlord were there, obviously. And they had their blisters of the Cruel Sea Cruise and extra weapons. So, as I haven't painted up my ship yet from the starter pack, I thought I'd get some of those.
Excellent.
Just to pimp up my boats. And then, final little purchase was, again, looking at Project Rommel, which is, sort of Germany versus Russia. I've also got in my pile of unpainted GHQ stuff some American tanks and half-tracks and vehicles, which I could do as Lend-Lease, but I thought I could also do a little bit of Western Front. So I picked up a little selection of the US infantry from Bacchus. Just to have a look at.
A little selection to have a look at.
There's only six small packs. Tiny little packs. Itty-bitty little packs and figures.
They barely count.
Barely count. I fitted the whole day's purchase into one small pack.
Now, there's one of the advantages of 6mm, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can hide it in your pocket on the way out.
Yeah. So that's that. That's me done.
Can I mention my purchases just very, very quickly?
Yeah, go on then. Go on then.
Just very quickly, because you pair actually caught me. I don't know if you recall this, and I was talking about rabbit warrens and holes. My friend Aid, who escorted me to the show, has had a long-held desire to do the 1809 campaign with French and Austrians and Bavarians, etc. He did originally think about doing it in 10mm. I then talked him round to do it in 6mm.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, exactly. So I said I would join him on that venture if he did it in 6mm. So I did end up with an Austrian army pack from Bacchus, and I've painted up the first unit of that, which is painted up very nicely.
And then, what is this madness? The fact that you bought an army pack on Sunday and you've painted miniatures already?
What did I tell you about letting them settle?
Well, if I'd known what I knew then, I clearly would have put them on the shelf and just let them mature for a short while. But it's madness, isn't it? It is absolute madness. I always said I'd never get back into Napoleonics. I did Napoleonics many years ago in 15mm, and always said I'd never go back to it. But yes, you did catch me at the moment of purchase of a division of Austrians.
So a division. So Austrians in 6mm.
In 6mm.
Lots of white then.
Spray them white. Spray them white. Bit of detail, and the aforementioned talent in a little bottle is the nut brown or peat brown ink from Winsor & Newton, which works just like the dips in the larger scales. It's absolutely magic.
Oh. Marvelous.
Highly recommended. And one or two other bits and pieces, but you don't know what to know about that. World War One for Teepval game at Joy of Six next year. Actually a set of the WRG 1925 to 1950 rules for World War Two. Which is it's one of those purchases just for nostalgic purposes. Let's say.
Okay, yeah. Don't play them.
Well, I talked about the heretical wargaming blog. He uses those rules to play the Too Fat Lardy campaigns with, the 29 Let's Go campaign. He has a grand old time with them. But you're right. I think it might just be a nostalgic purchase for me.
Yeah.
Good. Talk about crossing the streams.
Yeah, absolutely.
That being said, if people like them, they're great.
Exactly.
They're not for me.
We're a broad church.
Yes.
Indeed. Well, this has been a huge amount of fun. Thank you for coming on the show, Shaun. It's been fantastic to talk to you for the evening.
I've had a blast. Thanks, guys. Really had a blast. Thank you.
So yes, the aforementioned Blokes Down a Pub format of the show continues. With many thanks to Shaun for providing the company for this evening. We'll send you the bill for the beer.
I was just about to say the next round's on you, but you beat me to it.
So all the very best with the God's Own Scale podcast, mate.
Thank you.
And also with your continuing adventures in Mantic.
Yes.
And look forward to bumping into you in a show in the very near future.
Yeah, I look forward to it very much.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
So all that remains to be said is to say thank you as well to Mr. Hobbs for joining us. Thank you, sir.
Always happy to be here, Neil. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And it's been fab. And finally, thank you to everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. And we will catch up with you again in a couple of weeks. So until then, happy gaming. Take care. We'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Never know where to sleep.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.